You settle beneath the woven canopy of your dwelling as the air thickens with the scent of salt and wet bark. The night hums softly, the wings of insects, the hiss of a distant tide against coral shelves. A clay lamp breathes a slow amber light across your maps, its flame bending each time the wind slips through the reed walls. Outside, the sea air carries the faint sweetness of fermented fruit, the kind you and the other apprentices trade for a smile after a long day of charting. The city of Talarin settles too, its 1,000 hearths dimming to quiet coals. You exhale. The day's salt still clings to your hair. Beneath your knees, the floor feels cool, woven palm strips over packed sand. Somewhere beyond the walls, a conch horn sounds once, low and full, calling the last fishers home. It is the sound that tells the city to sleep. You reach for the polished crystal lens you use to map the stars. Its smooth edge catches the lamplight like still water. Asher, they call you the girl who can make the heavens hold still. You smile at that, though you know it is only patience, not magic. You have spent years drawing the same constellations again and again until your hands remember every curve of them. The hunter's belt, the twin rivers, the serpent that swallows the moon. Your teacher, Erin of the North Dunes, says that to chart the stars is to measure the heartbeat of time itself. Tonight, you trace that rhythm again in the dust of your map slate, marking where the solstice sun will rise a month from now, if the rains come as expected. But lately, nothing has come as expected. The air has changed, it is thicker, stranger, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Outside, from the open corridor, you hear the elders murmuring. Their voices rise and fall like surf. They speak of the sea withdrawing far beyond the reefs today, farther than any living memory. The fishers say the sand glistened for leagues, the seaweed still wet where waves once slept. Some of the children ran to gather shells from that new-born plain, laughing until the elders called them back in fear. The sea does not flee without reason, they said. You remember the way the horizon looked at dusk, a dark blue line pulled unnaturally far away. You had drawn it by habit, thinking to note the tide's measure, but your hand had trembled. Even now, the image will not leave you. You rise, cross the room, and lift the woven mat that serves as a door. The outside air folds around you, warm, damp, heavy with the breath of vegetation. Fireflies drift near the path, their light weak but steady. Along the ridge, the night gardens still whisper with water. The irrigation channels run from the hills, feeding terraces of millet and tubers, each stalk silvered by the moon. Beyond them lies the open coast, dark, endless, uncertain. You pull your shawl closer. It smells faintly of smoke and crushed leaves, the scent of your mother's hands. She is long gone inland with the herb gatherers, seeking cooler air among the high caves where obsidian forms. She used to tell you that the earth dreams like a great animal. Long sleeps, long wakings. When you see the sky tremble, it means she is turning in her rest. At the edge of the path, the cartographer's hole glows dimly. You walk toward it, the ground soft beneath your feet. Inside, a few of your peers linger. Reed scrolls and clay tablets lie scattered on the floor, the marks of hurried measurements. On the main wall, a great skin map of the coast stretches across the frame, drawn in charcoal and ochre. You help draw part of it, the mouth of the Garan River, the jagged line of coral cliffs, the string of small villages that trade in shell jewelry and volcanic glass. Now in the lamplight, you notice something unsettling. The ink along the coastline looks wrong. Aaron stands there stooped, his fingers resting on the edge of the map. His hair is pale from the salt wind, his eyes half shadowed. He glances toward you. You see it too. He murmurs. You nod. The seas fall. He gestures to a row of wooden rods set in clay, a tidal record of the past seasons. The newest rod stands half a hand lower than any before it. The sea remembers something, he says quietly. But I do not know if she forgives. A silence blooms between you. You listen to the night frogs in the channels, the creak of wood as the heat settles out of it. Someone turns a clay pot nearby and the faint sound of ferment bubbling joins the chorus. Aaron moves closer to the open doorway and breathes deeply. Do you smell it? You do. The wind carries a faint metallic tang, like rain that never falls. It has been there for days, mingling with the usual scents of brine and reed. Storms, you ask. He shakes his head. Something colder. You look up at the stars. The constellations seem sharper tonight. The air clearer than usual, as if the light between worlds has thinned. You draw your lens again and measure the position of the twin stars of the serpent, your reference for the southern horizon. Their angle is off by a fraction, or perhaps your hands are trembling again. Behind you, Aaron says softly, there will be a gathering tomorrow at dawn. The seers wish to speak. You nod, feeling the unease settle deeper in your chest. When you return to your dwelling, you find the lamp nearly spent. You kneel beside it, watching the last of the oil flicker. The shadows dance across your half-finished map. You think of the trade canoes that travel the coasts, each guided by stars you helped to chart. You think of the villagers that send them offerings, carved shells, obsidian shards, smoked fish. If the sea is truly changing, what happens to all of them? You lie down on the sleeping mat. The hum of insects is steady now, soothing in its repetition. Through the wall you hear your neighbor whispering to her child, singing the lullaby about the sky, ancestors who descend in light to plant knowledge in stone. Her voice rises and falls with the wind, and you feel a small comfort in its rhythm. You close your eyes, but the image returns: the empty horizon, the sea pulled away like a breath before a sigh. At dawn the light comes pale and uncertain. The humidity has deepened overnight, and the air feels like damp cloth on your skin. You wash your face in cool water and dress in a light tunic of woven reed fiber, tying the small obsidian compass around your neck. The plaza before the temple is already crowded. The elders stand on the stone dais, their robes dark with dew. You notice the animal flocks herded behind them: goats, water birds, restless, uneasy. Even the dogs keep close to their masters, their ears twitching toward the inland forests. The head seer Talik lifts his hand for silence. The crowd stills. You can hear the faint roar of the tide, though it is far away. The sea has withdrawn, Talik says, his voice slow and calm. It reveals what sleeps beneath, but the air grows cold above the hills, and the rains no longer come. This is a sign that the balance trembles. You remember what Erin said last night: something colder. You feel it now, faint but certain, a cool breath in the humid morning. The elders of the north speak of new stars seen beyond the serpent's coil. Talik continues: fire across the sky like falling embers. We send runners to watch the rivers. They rise even when there is no rain. A murmur runs through the crowd. People shift, whisper, make the sign of the spiral over their hearts. You feel your own pulse quicken. Erin stands beside you, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Comets, he murmurs, or fragments. You nod, though you have never seen such a thing. Talik lowers his hand. Go about your work. But listen, the world is remembering. The gathering disperses slowly. You walk toward the harbor with Erin, the wooden walkway warm under your bare feet. The tide has not yet returned. Where water should be, there is only glistening mud and stranded coral, small pools filled with trapped fish. Children wade carefully, gathering them in baskets. The canoes lie tilted on their sides, ropes slack. Erin crouches beside a puddle and touches the water. It feels colder than it should. He looks up at you. Mark this day, Asha. The maps must change. You kneel beside him, feeling the chill seep into your fingers. You imagine the old maps you've drawn, all those delicate coastlines, their edges soft and sure. You imagine them erased by the tide's hand. The sun climbs higher, but its heat feels thin, distant. You sense the first whisper of what is to come, the younger Dryas cold creeping unseen, the great reversal of the earth's breath. That evening, as the city prepares for sleep, you walk along the elevated paths that cross the mangrove shallows. The air smells of smoke from the drying racks where fish are being preserved in anticipation of poor catches. The smoke mingles with the perfume of flowering pandanus and the brine of the exposed shore. The horizon glows faintly where the sun sank, a pale rose fading to blue-gray. You pause to watch the last light touch the surface of your lens. The reflection wavers, breaks into two. Do you ever feel, you whisper to the wind, that we are being watched from beneath? Only the tide answers, a slow returning hiss as water creeps back over the flats. The first returning wave breaks with a hollow sound, as if the sea is sighing in relief. You watch it uneasy. It should feel like safety, the ocean's return, but it feels instead like a warning. You turn back toward the city. The lamps of Talarin burn low, tiny embers in the damp. Somewhere a drum beats once, then twice, signaling curfew. You make your way home through narrow paths lined with baskets of stored millet and jars of preserved fruit. People speak softly tonight. The usual laughter of evening meals is gone. Even the dogs are quiet. In your dwelling, you light a small fire of driftwood and crushed resin. The flame burns blue at first, strange, and then settles to gold. You unroll your slate and begin redrawing the coastline. You add new marks where the sea withdrew, then shaded lines where it might one day rise again. The work steadies you. You stop only when your wrist cramps. The fire has dwindled to coals. You stretch your fingers, then look out through the doorway. The stars are sharp again, glittering like frost. For a long moment you simply breathe. The air is cooling fast. You can see your breath now, a faint mist in the lamplight. That has never happened before. You wrap your shawl tighter, feeling the chill touch your throat. The sea murmurs softly in the distance. The sound is rhythmic, like a heart remembering how to beat. You think of your mother, somewhere inland under the high obsidian caves. You think of the words she left you: the earth dreams like an animal. Perhaps you think, this is the moment of her turning. You press the edge of your obsidian compass to your palm until it leaves a shallow mark, just enough to remind you that the world is still solid beneath the skies trembling. Then, as the first light frost touches the outer leaves of your garden, you lie down. The smell of wood smoke folds around you like a blanket. The tide has returned, but you know something has shifted in its depths. The maps are changing, the stars too, and as you drift towards sleep, you realize the air has gone perfectly still. You let it be. You breathe in the scent of the earth, the salt, the faint cool whisper of a world about to remember itself. The next morning, the sea smells sharper than before, like metal and rain. You wake to the sound of gulls crying inland, far from their usual feeding grounds. The air through your window is cool, tasting faintly of ash though no fires burn nearby. You sit up slowly, the woven mat crackling beneath you, and for a long moment you listen to the silence beneath the bird calls. Something in that silence feels hollow, stretched. You step outside and find frost shimmering faintly on the millet leaves. Frost, here in the humid coastlands. You touch one blade gently and feel it melt against your skin. The elders say that such cold once lived only on the mountain spines to the north, where obsidian is born in fire. But now, even here, the earth's breath has changed. Your neighbors are gathered near the central hearth. Their fires burn high, blue smoke rising in ribbons through the open roof. A group of fishers stands apart, their eyes hollow. You hear them whispering about the boats that vanish before dawn, 2 reed canoes from the southern bay. The sea had looked calm, they say, but then the water turned black and heavy, pulling one vessel under without a sound. The other fled, leaving its nets behind. Aaron finds you there, his cloak damp from the mist. Asher, he says quietly, come to the hall. You should see this. You follow him through narrow lanes lined with baskets of smoked fish and clay jars sealed with resin. The air carries the smell of wet rope and the faint sweetness of ferment. At the hall, several apprentices are gathered around the Great Wall map. It looks different now, sections erased, new charcoal lines traced where the shoreline has altered. Aaron gestures to the tidal rods again. Overnight, the water has surged higher than ever before. The sea returned, he says, and more than returned. The flood reached the lower terraces. 2 storehouses are lost. You blink at the new markings, the smeared charcoal indicating where the river delta now extends. It rose this high, 3 hands above the old level. The people of Lamu village have moved to the high ridge. We will need to redraw everything. He hands you a new clay tablet, smooth, freshly baked in the morning fires. The scent of it still carries the warmth of kiln ash. You will mark the coastal migration paths. He says, start with the fishers' reports. They've seen schools of fish swimming inland, as though the sea itself is confused. You nod, though your hand trembles slightly as you take the stylus. By midday, the sky darkens strangely. Not a storm, the clouds move high and fast, like pale smoke streaking eastward. The air grows colder again. From the docks people look upward, shielding their eyes. You see it then, a light crossing the sky, white and silent, like a falling ember that never burns out. It moves steadily far above the clouds and vanishes behind the mountains. Someone gasps. Someone else kneels, whispering a prayer to the sky serpent, guardian of the upper fire. Aaron's voice beside you is calm but taut. A fragment, he says. A stone from beyond the breath of air. You glance at him. Has it happened before? Not in my lifetime. Perhaps not since the ancestors first carved the serpent stones. The crowd murmurs, and the moment passes like a held breath finally released. But inside you something has awakened. A thought that feels like a spark struck in dry grass. If the sky changes, if the seas move, then the maps you make are no longer records, they are warnings. That evening, you sit by your fire with the tablet on your knees. You carve the coastline's new shape, tracing each curve slowly. The reed pen scratches softly, the clay yielding under your hand. You mark the villages that have moved inland, the trade routes now flooded. You pause and study your work. The map looks smaller somehow, the world shrinking underwater. Outside, voices drift through the damp air. Men discussing rations, women counting the stores of millet and dried shellfish. You hear the worry under their calm tones. If the rains fail again, if the sea salt taints the wells, the city's gardens will wither. You close your eyes and picture your mother's face. The way she used to hum as she ground tubers into paste. She would say, the earth remembers balance by forgetting comfort. A sound draws your attention back to the night, a rhythmic drip, 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 like water leaking through stone. You step outside and follow it to the base of your dwelling. There, where the ground dips toward the shore, a new spring of fresh water has begun to flow, trickling up from the earth. You taste it cautiously. Cold, pure, the kind of cold that belongs to mountain snow, not the lowland coast. You stand there, uncertain whether to feel awe or fear. Behind you, footsteps approach. It is Talik the seer, his robe catching faintly on the reeds. His voice is soft, but it carries weight. The sea withdraws. The sky sends fire. The earth gives new water. The 3 realms speak at once. You bow your head slightly. Do we listen? He studies you, the lines on his face deep as riverbeds. You are a mapper of paths, Asher, tell me. If the stars moved, would you still follow them? You hesitate. I would learn their new order. He smiles faintly. Then you understand. The heavens are changing. It is not for fear, but for remembering. He looks toward the horizon, where a pale glow still lingers. Tomorrow I will send word to the high observatory in the Obsidian Hills. They must record this sky fire. Perhaps it is a message from our ancestors. You watch the old man disappear into the mist. The water continues to trickle at your feet, and you wonder if the earth truly can speak, or if she only dreams aloud through the shifting of her bones. That night, the temperature falls sharply again. Your breath mists in the lamplight as you work. The sound of waves crashing comes irregularly now, too slow, too deep, as though the ocean has changed its rhythm. You trace the stars through your crystal lens once more. The serpent's head has moved. Not much, but enough that your older charts no longer align. The twin rivers of the sky seem to bend closer together, their light colder, sharper. You press your palm flat to the table, feeling the grain of the wood, grounding yourself. You think of how your people built this city on land reclaimed from the sea centuries ago, how they believed the tides would always obey the moon. Now the moon itself looks different, larger, pale at the edges. Surrounded by a faint halo, you write a single line on the edge of your slate. The stars are drifting. The sea dreams of return. At dawn, runners arrive from the southern coast. Their feet are coated in grey silt, their faces drawn tight with fatigue. The square fills quickly as their message spreads, a village swallowed overnight by sudden floodwater. No storm, no warning. The river simply reversed its course and poured inland. You join Aaron at the docks where the runners rest, drinking from clay cups. The younger of the two gestures wildly, describing how the water glowed in the moonlight, how the shellfish died in masses, floating like pale petals. It came like a wall, he says, no wind before it, no rain. Aaron listens quietly. Then he says, the northern ice must be breaking. You know the word, ice. The elders speak of it rarely. Vast frozen lands beyond the mountains where the sun never warms. If that world is melting, the seas will rise higher than any flood memory holds. You glance at the trade canoes drawn up on the beach, their hulls sealed with resin, ready for the next expedition. They seem suddenly fragile, woven reeds against an ocean that now feels alive, unpredictable. Later, when the sun stands high and pale, you climb to the observatory ridge with Aaron. From there, the entire coast of Talarin spreads below, a quilt of gardens, waterways, and clustered roofs. You can see where the flood has licked at the lower terraces, leaving lines of salt across the soil. Aaron unfolds one of your maps, the latest version, and sets a stone on each corner to hold it in place. This, he says, tracing the coastline, will be gone within the season if the water keeps rising. You feel the words settle inside you like a slow ember. Then we must make a map of what will come, you say quietly. He glances at you, surprised. Of what will come? Yes, not what is, but what might be. The rivers that will break their banks, the high ridges that will remain. Aaron studies you for a moment, then nods slowly. That would be a new kind of chart. You both fall silent, watching a thin band of mist drift across the mangroves. The air smells faintly of minerals and distant rain. Far out to sea, the light catches on something, a reflection like glass or metal, vanishing as quickly as it appears. You don't mention it, though you know Aaron saw it too. The spark is alive now, not a call to flee, not yet, but a call to see, to understand what the world is becoming before it's lost. That evening, the city gathers again in the plaza. Fires burn high to fight the chill. People bring their offerings, bowls of millet, shells, fruit, wine, and place them before the temple steps. The air smells of wood smoke and fermented sweetness, and though the ceremony is meant to calm fear, you can feel the tension under the rhythm of drums. When Talik speaks, his voice carries across the square. The stars have shifted, he says. The earth trembles with new water. We must remember who we are, not as those who cling, but as those who map the change. The crowd murmurs in assent, though many eyes are shadowed by worry. You glance at Aaron, who gives a faint nod. He understands. The world is changing faster than anyone can measure, and someone must chart its memory before it vanishes. You close your hand around your obsidian compass, its edge biting gently into your skin. The small pain centers you. The metal scent of the sea drifts inland again, stronger than before. You whisper to yourself, if the stars move, I will follow them. For the first time, the thought does not frighten you. Later, when the city sleeps, you climb to the roof of your dwelling. The sky is astonishingly clear, the milky river of stars bright as frost. You trace the constellations slowly, naming them in a whisper. The wind tastes of salt and cold stone. Below, the tide moves restlessly, pushing higher against the shore. You can hear it lapping against the stilts of the lower houses, an irregular pulse. You watch the stars until your eyes blur, then lower your gaze to the dark water. Somewhere beneath that shifting surface, the outlines of your ancestors' cities lie buried, older than memory, silent, dreaming. A streak of light flares again across the heavens, swift, silent, leaving a faint trail of green. You feel it like a breath through your bones. The spark catches deeper this time. You whisper to the night, the world is speaking, and in the stillness that follows, it feels as if the world whispers back. The morning breaks in shades of pewter and rose. Mist folds over the marsh paths, blurring the outline of the stilted homes along the inlet. You rise to the taste of salt on your lips, to the scent of fish smoke drifting from the drying racks near the docks. Beneath the woven mat where you sleep, the floor is cool, slick with beads of sea fog that seep through the reed walls overnight. Outside, the first gulls cry, sharp, insistent, circling over the place where the water had retreated days ago and has not quite returned to its rhythm since. You pull on your coat of softened bark fiber and step out into the hush of morning. The air feels uneasy, like it's waiting for something. Behind the line of houses, the forest hums with waking life. Fruit bats wheeling, frogs clicking in the marsh pools, insects already at work under the broad leaves of ferns. You cross the narrow bridge of palm slats toward the cartographer's hut, where your mentor, Terran, has already lit a small lamp. Inside, the smell of lamp oil and scorched resin clings to everything. The curved lenses you polished last week catch the weak dawn light. Terran is crouched over the stone map table, running a finger along one of the etched coastlines. He doesn't look up when you enter. His beard is wet with dew, his eyes rimmed with red. He has been awake all night again, studying the tide charts. Charts that no longer match what the sea does. You saw it again last night, he says finally, his voice rough. The water pulling too far. You nod. The others saw it too, you say quietly. They whisper it's the breath of the deep. The earth exhaling before a sleep. Terran snorts, a sound more wary than amused. The earth does not sleep, Asher. But she does change her skin. He taps the etched map. These rivers we trace, these shallows we mark, they were once mountains long ago. Maybe they will be again. We live between breaths, child. We forget how small our pulse is next to hers. Outside, a shout rises, not alarm, but argument. You recognize the voice. Larry, your cousin, the fisher who runs the tide, weirs east of the inlet. You step to the door. She is standing on the boardwalk with two others, her bare feet muddy, hair plastered to her neck with spray. She's holding a net, tangled and torn. They say the stars have shifted. She calls out. But the fish are gone because the sea has turned against us. The tide broke one of the outer markers last night. The elders want everyone inland by the next moonrise. Terran stiffens beside you. They'll call it a migration again, he murmurs. They always do when fear returns. Larry turns on you, eyes fierce. You and your star charts won't stop the cold wind that's coming, Asher. Look at the birds. Look at the beasts fleeing the marsh. You should come with us. Her words hit like a sudden gust. You glance toward the horizon, pale, rising mist, a tremor of light where the sea should be. Something has shifted, yes, but the pull inside you is not toward escape. I count, you say softly. Not yet. Larry shakes her head, muttering under her breath. The ones who stay to measure always drown with their maps. She throws the net over her shoulder and vanishes into the fog. That evening, the council gathers in the stone circle. Every city in Talarin sends its voice. The fishers, the traders, the water keepers, the healers. Torches flicker along the inner walls, their smoke curling like dark vines into the humid air. You stand at the edge behind Terran. The sand beneath your feet is cold. The smell of oil lamps and crushed shell fills the air. Elder Vec, oldest of the water keepers, leans on a carved staff of driftwood. His voice is dry, rasped by years of salt wind. The sea eats her own bones, he says. The winds twist backward. The nights grow long before their time. We have seen these omens in the star wheel. It turns against its path. The time of thinning has come again. A murmur passes through the crowd. People shift uneasily. Some clutch their charms of bone and shell, carved with the old glyphs of the sky ancestors. Terran steps forward. The star paths are steady, he says. The wheel does not lie. It is the world beneath us that moves, not the heavens above. The lowlands are sinking. The sea will rise. Gasps ripple outward. Blasphemy, someone mutters. But Terran doesn't yield. He gestures for you to bring the carved lens disc, a polished stone embedded with inlaid bronze rings. You hold it up to the torchlight, letting it cast faint circles of reflection onto the sand. The engraved stars shimmer, and the murmuring deepens. The wheel marks the solstice. You say quietly, voice carrying despite the tremor in it. The sun rose 3 days early this turning. That has never happened before in my lifetime. Silence. Then Elder Vec leans forward. And what do you make of it, girl of maps? You hesitate. I think something beneath the world is shifting the waters. The air carries more ice. The animals feel it. The rivers have lost their course. If we move inland now, we may find land that lasts. A wave of low voices rises. Dissent, disbelief. One of the traders speaks. We have built stone harbors, we have cured fish for seasons ahead. You would have us leave it all because of a shadow in the stars. The firelight flickers across faces. Fear, defiance, exhaustion. Larry's mother, standing near the front, turns toward you. You are young, she says gently. Her young eyes see too far. The world does not end. It changes its mask. You lower your gaze, fingers tightening around the lens disc. The metal is warm from your touch, slick with the salt of your palms. That night, sleep doesn't come easily. The air presses heavy inside your small house. Through the slats, you can see the glow of lanterns by the shore, the watchman keeping vigil, waiting for the tide to return. You lie on your side listening. The ocean's breath is uneven, its usual rhythm broken. Somewhere beyond the mist, a deep sound echoes, like a sigh drawn from the roots of the world. Your mind drifts to the old myths your mother used to tell of the sky, ancestor who mapped the first horizon on water and taught humankind to follow its reflection. All things that vanish, she had said, are written elsewhere. Perhaps this vanishing, too, is being written, in stone in the stars in the cold breath of the coming age. Days pass and the disquiet grows. The weather turns unseasonably cold. Birds once bound for the southern marshes now circle north in confusion. The ground feels strange underfoot, damp, unsettled, as though breathing. Taran begins mapping the coastline again, though his hands tremble from sleeplessness. You walk with him at dawn carrying the stone compasses and clay tablets. The beach stretches wider each morning. Where there was once blue water, there are now pale flats of exposed coral and twisted roots glistening with stranded fish. He stops often, squinting at the horizon. I saw the same sign when I was a boy, he says one morning. The year the monsoon failed, but this. He shakes his head. The sea does not pull so far unless the world itself is turning in its bed. You glance at him. You believe it now, the change. He nods slowly. Belief has little to do with it. I feel it in my bones. The next gust of wind carries a chill sharp enough to sting your throat. The resistance grows stronger after that. Families begin dismantling their huts, loading woven baskets and clay jars into reed boats. The council orders the map makers to cease their useless measures and assist with the inland move. When you refuse, the chief steward comes to your hut. His face is grim but not cruel. Taran will go with us, he says. You should too. The elders say the ice will not wait. I have to finish the chart, you reply. If the coast vanishes, someone must remember its shape. He sighs, looking at the rows of tablets spread around your workbench. No one will thank you for remembering what is gone. When he leaves, the silence feels heavier than before. That night, Taran returns late, his cloak soaked, his breath ragged. They won't listen, he mutters, sinking onto the bench. They'll take the boats inland at first light. You hand him a jar of fermented fruit drink, the tang of yeast and smoke filling the air. Then we'll go as far as the mountains. You say, where can map from there? He studies you, wary eyes softening, mouth curved in something between sadness and pride. You remind me of myself before the salt got into my blood, he murmurs. Then, quietly, Asho, if this cold truly deepens, if the waters rise, remember maps are not for saving land. They are for finding yourself again after the loss. The lamp flickers, throwing his shadow long against the reed wall. Outside, the tide groans. A faint vibration trembles through the planks, distant, subterranean, like the world's heartbeat shifting in its sleep. By dawn, the exodus begins. Smoke trails drift inland as fires are doused, as boats are hauled up the muddy channels. You stand alone on the high dune, looking down at the departing line, figures small and wavering in the morning haze. The sea is still withdrawing. The horizon looks wrong, curved in ways you can't quite name. You kneel, press your palm into the damp sand, and whisper to the tide, not a plea but a promise. I will remember. The cold wind stings your lips. Somewhere far below, the breath of the earth deepens, slow, ancient, unrelenting. And though the others move inland, a quiet certainty roots itself in you like a flame in ash, that to stay and watch is also an act of courage. The morning arrives with an ache in the air. Cold dew gathers on the reeds, turning the paths silver. The boats have gone. Their wakes are faint ripples fading into mist, vanishing before they reach the horizon. You stand alone on the high dune, where the grass grows thin and the sand smells faintly of metal and rain. The wind carries the ghost of smoke from cooking fires now extinguished, a scent that feels like the last warmth of a home half forgotten. Below, Talarin lies hollow. The market platforms are empty, their woven mats still fluttering in the breeze. Fish racks sway with the tide's breath, though the tide itself has receded so far that only the sound of wet sand shifting remains. The silence of it fills your chest like a held breath. You breathe out slowly. The air tastes of salt and iron. It's colder today than it should be. Even the insects are quiet. You draw your cloak tighter and feel the weight of the obsidian compass against your ribs. The small round instrument Taran gave you when you first became his apprentice. You trace its smooth edge through the fabric. The decision has been swelling in you for days like a tide beneath the heart. But now, with the city emptied and the horizon stripped bare, the moment feels simple. There is no dramatic wind, no sign from the gods, only stillness, and the faint tremor of the earth below your feet. You will stay. Not because you expect to outlast what's coming. Not because you think knowledge can protect you, but because someone must witness the change, must draw the line between what was and what will be. Taran had always said that maps are a memory given shape. If so, then perhaps staying is its own kind of remembrance. By mid-morning, the clouds begin to roll inland, dark and low. The light shifts, flat, silvery, like a reflection through deep water. You walk the narrow bridges between the empty houses, the wood creaking beneath your sandals. The air smells of drying salt and reed oil. Somewhere, a lone gull cries, high, thin, lost. In Taran's hut, everything remains as he left it. His charts are stacked in neat rows, weighted with carved stones. The lamp has burned out, leaving a residue of soot on the clay walls. You touch the surface of the stone map table. It's cold, the lines etched faintly beneath your fingertips. You pick up his stylus, obsidian, tipped, bound with sinew. For a moment you just hold it, feeling its slight tremble in your hand, as though it remembers the weight of years. Then, slowly, you begin to trace new lines across the surface of a blank clay tablet, the vanished coastline, the receding tide, the direction of the migrating flocks you saw at dawn. Outside, a light drizzle begins. The sound of raindrops on reed roofs is soft and rhythmic, like breathing. You feel calmer than you have in days. When the rain deepens, you light a small fire inside the hearth pit, feeding it with dried palm leaves and strips of resinous bark. The smoke smells sweet and familiar. You hang your damp cloak nearby to dry, then sit cross-legged on the woven mat. The fire's glow flickers across the walls, making the shadows sway gently like underwater currents. You take out your mother's pendant, a carved piece of shell, etched with the spiral glyph of the wind. It catches the firelight and gleams pale gold. You turn it in your palm. The edges are worn smooth from years against your skin. She had once told you, the wind remembers what the mouth forgets. You think of her voice, low, measured, with that steady patience that could outlast any storm. She had died during the last great monsoon, when the river tore through the outer huts. You still remember the smell of wet earth, the way her hand had slipped from yours in the flood. The pendant feels warm now, as if some part of her still hums through it. You hang it near the fire to dry, whispering under your breath, "I'll keep your place in the map, mother." The flames crackle softly in reply. Evening comes early. The mist thickens, turning the air a dull grey. The horizon disappears. The last of the light filters through the gaps in the roof like drifting threads of silver. You step outside for a moment and listen, truly listen. There is no bird song, no human voice, only the quiet pulse of the sea far away, hidden behind a veil of fog, and beneath that, something deeper. A faint rumble, as though the ocean is clearing its throat before speaking again. You close your eyes. You can feel the shift now, not as fear, but as gravity. Something vast and old turning beneath the crust of the world. You imagine the layers of water pressing outward, the melt from northern ice sliding into ancient channels, the deep currents twisting like muscle under skin. For a brief moment you sense it, the pattern behind all movement, the symmetry between sky and sea, between your breath and the wind. It feels like standing inside the pulse of creation itself. When you open your eyes, tears have gathered without reason. You wipe them away, though your hands are trembling. Later, as darkness settles, you return inside. The fire has burned low and the room is wrapped in amber shadows. You unroll a fresh reed mat and spread your remaining tools. A slate of baked clay, your carving stylus, a small jar of black pigment made from char and oil. You draw by firelight, tracing what you remember of the stars above Tala Rin. Though the clouds have hidden them for nights now, their positions live in your muscles, in the slow rhythm of your breath. You ink the line of the archer's belt, the twin circles of the river serpent, the pale arc that marks the turning of the solstice. Each line steadies you. Each curve is a heartbeat against the unknown. As you work, you murmur the old cartographer's prayer, part memory, part song. Let the hand remember what the eyes forget. Let the stars return even when the sky is gone. Your voice barely breaks the hush of the night, yet it feels like the world is listening. Sometime near midnight, you hear the wind change. It rushes inland with sudden strength, rattling the reed walls and scattering the ashes in the hearth. You rise, steadying the lamp. The smell of ozone and rain fills the room. A low thunder rolls across the horizon, muted but endless. You step outside. The storm hasn't arrived yet, but the clouds are alive with light, not bright bolts but slow flickers, like something pulsing deep within their bellies. The air hums against your skin. You walk to the edge of the pier. The wooden boards are slick, glistening. The sea, far below, seems to breathe heavier with each passing minute. In the dim glow, you see shapes gliding through the shallows. Schools of fish, confused and restless, moving inland instead of out. Usher, the world whispers. The sound isn't from the wind, not from the waves, but from somewhere inside you, a quiet knowing, the realization that this night marks the hinge of all that will follow. The people are gone. The city will drown. The maps will one day fade to dust. But your hand will have traced the shape of their memory. You kneel at the pier's edge, dipping your fingers into the cold brine. The water stings, sharp, mineral, alive. You scoop a handful, let it run through your fingers, and whisper, "For those who come after." Then, slowly, you unclasp your mother's pendant and let it fall into the dark. It sinks without a sound, the ripples spreading outward, delicate as breath. You stay there a while, watching the water calm. The night smells of salt and smoke and something distant, snow perhaps, drifting from a world yet unseen. When you finally stand, the decision feels complete, not as defiance, but as peace. You gather your tools, your charts, and a single sealed jar of pigment. You wrap them carefully in cloth and set them beside your mat. Tomorrow you will climb the inland ridge, chart from above, and record the last of the old sea's shape before it changes forever. For now, though, you let the stillness return. You listen to the slow rhythm of rain against the roof, to the breath of the wind through the slats, to your own heartbeat syncing with the quiet world. Outside, the mist curls low around the empty houses, soft as memory. You lie back on your mat, the faint scent of resin smoke in your hair, and close your eyes. The earth is remembering, you think, and so are you. The fire sighs once, and the night folds itself around you like a blanket. The world wakes grey and wet. Rain has come in the night, a steady curtain that softens every sound and leaves the air heavy with the scent of loam and smoke. You rise before dawn, fingers stiff from the chill, and coax the coals in your hearth back to life. The flames catch with a hiss, licking at the bark strips you feed them. Their warmth creeps into your bones, slow and steady. You sit beside the fire, unwrapping the bundle you prepared before sleep. The rolled maps, the clay jar of pigment sealed with resin, the obsidian compass, and the smooth stylus bound in sinew. Around you the room is dim, the air damp enough that each breath leaves a small ghost in the light. Today is the day you begin to gather what you will need. The sea's breath has turned colder again overnight. When you step outside, the air tastes faintly of ice, sharp, clean, unnatural for this coast. Mist drapes itself over the marshes and empty lanes of Tala Rin. The city feels hollow but not yet dead. A few homes still hold their shapes, their reed roofs sagging under the weight of water. Somewhere a door knocks against its frame in the wind. You pull your cloak tight and head toward the old storehouse at the center of the trade quarter. Once bright with the sound of barter, now quiet except for the drip of rain through the thatch. The smell here is strong old salt, dried fish, wet earth, resin and smoke. Inside, shelves lean under the weight of half-forgotten tools and jars. You light a small oil lamp and begin to search. The first thing you find is a bundle of cured bark cloth, good for wrapping the clay tablets and for insulation. You shake out the water, fold it neatly. Next, a coil of twine made from twisted palm fiber. It's rough against your palms, but strong enough to lash the bundles. In a corner lies a stack of ceramic jars once used for trade: fermented millet, dried berries, saltfish. You check each one. The first few are empty. The fourth still holds millet, hard but usable. You weigh it in your hands. Perhaps 3 measures left, enough for 4 days if you ration carefully. You set it aside, whispering the numbers under your breath. 4 days' grain. 2 jars of dried fruit, half jar saltfish. Beside the door you find a small woven basket of obsidian flakes. You run your thumb along one edge. The glassy surface bites slightly into your skin, sharp enough to cut leather. You take 3, wrap them in bark cloth, and slide them into your pouch. Then you find what you didn't expect: a length of oiled reed rope, and beside it, a hand-sized stone blade attached to a wooden handle with resin and sinew. A proper knife, sturdy and balanced. You test its weight, listening to the faint hum it makes when you swing it through air. A tool like this would have cost 2 shell rings in the market before, or a week's worth of smoked fish. Now it's just waiting. You whisper a small thanks and slide it into your belt. Outside, the rain has thinned to a drizzle. You pull your hood up and walk toward the inland path that leads past the old trading pier. The tide, when it comes, does so reluctantly now, only a thin sheet of water licking the mudflats. The smell of exposed coral and kelp fills the air, strong and sour. You pause beside a toppled storage crate. Inside, you find a half-broken clay jar filled with something pale and granular: salt. The good kind, white and fine, gathered from evaporated tide pools. You scoop some into a smaller pouch, careful not to waste any. Salt is worth its weight now. A way to preserve fish, to trade if you meet anyone inland. As you stand, a movement catches your eye. An old man is sitting under the shelter of a collapsed stall, wrapped in a cloak of woven reeds darkened by rain. His face is long, his beard streaked with white. You recognize him after a moment. Oru, the trader who once ran the southern route, known for bringing volcanic glass from the islands beyond the strait. You hadn't seen him in weeks. You stayed, he says quietly, his voice deep and rough as the tide pools. You nod, to map the change. He chuckles softly, shaking his head. Always the map makers, measuring even the breath of dying things. You sit beside him. The wood beneath you is cold and slick. He reaches into the folds of his cloak and pulls out a small jar sealed with resin. Inside, you can see pale yellow oil, thick, fragrant, smelling faintly of crushed seeds. Lantern oil, he says, still good. Found it in the warehouses north of the docks. You'll need it more than I. You hesitate, then accept it with both hands. The jar is heavy and warm from his touch. I can trade, you offer, salt or pigment. He shakes his head. Keep your trade. Just promise me you'll write the truth of what you see. Not the stories the elders will tell when they speak of this place, the truth. You meet his eyes. They are pale grey, like weathered stone, and behind them something fragile flickers. Not fear, exactly, but acceptance. I will, you say. He nods once, satisfied. Then, after a pause, you'll find the inland trail broken past the Black Ridge. The rain has taken half the bridge. Use the high path through the banyans. 3 days' walk if the ground holds. You memorize the route silently. He leans back against the post, looking toward the horizon. Talarin was never meant to last. He murmurs. Built too close to the sea. We thought the world would keep its shape. His words hang in the air. You bow your head in respect, then rise. When you look back, he has closed his eyes, the rain beading along his cloak. By midday you've filled your pack. It's not much, but it's enough. 2 clay jars of millet and dried fruit, 4 days' rations. 1 pouch of salt, a knife with an obsidian edge, 3 spare flakes for cutting, rope, twine and barkcloth wrappings, your compass and maps, a small jar of lantern oil, a rolled reed mat for sleeping. You tie it all with a woven strap and lift it to your shoulders. The weight pulls against your back, familiar and grounding. You check the sky, low clouds heavy with moisture, drifting east. The wind smells of river mud and faint frost. Somewhere inland thunder murmurs. Before leaving, you make one last round of the city. The silence is immense, yet filled with memory. You pass the abandoned docks, the hollow courtyards, the shrine where the wind bells still hang, chiming faintly. Each sound feels like a heartbeat fading. You stop by the central well. The water's surface is dark, mirror smooth. You drop a single shard of shell into it, watching the ripples spread. For the maps that will follow mine, you whisper. By afternoon, the rain clears. Weak sunlight glimmers through, striking the pools along the empty streets. Steam rises from the wet earth. The air smells clean, washed. You take it as a sign to begin your inland climb. But before leaving, you stop once more at Terran's hut. The air inside is dry now, the fire pit cold. On his worktable lies one of the small lens discs he used to calibrate the star marks. The bronze rings catch the light, casting a faint circle on the wall. You lift it, feeling its smooth edge. It's lighter than you remembered, fragile, yet enduring. You slide it carefully into your pack beside the compass. Then, noticing the corner of the table, you find a folded scrap of barkcloth pressed beneath a stone weight. When you unfold it, faint lines reveal themselves, Terran's handwriting. The last measurements he made before the council fled. One note stands out: the sea will not return. The cold breath has begun. You trace the words with your thumb. There's no bitterness in them, only fact, drawn with the calm of a man who had seen the world change before. You refold the cloth and place it in your pouch. Outside, the light deepens toward dusk. The mist curls low again, wrapping the city in its quiet shroud. You shoulder your pack and stand at the edge of the high path. The inland hills are a blue haze, their ridges soft against the fading sky. The smell of wet stone and new leaves rises from the forest. You pause once more, looking back at Talarin. Its empty docks, its still water, the faint gleam of the sea far beyond. The wind shifts, carrying the distant cry of some unseen bird. You close your eyes and breathe it in. Salt, smoke, the faint sweetness of decaying reeds. Every scent a memory. Then you turn inland. Each step sinks slightly into the damp ground, leaving a print that the rain will soon erase. You walk until the houses vanish behind the veil of fog and the forest begins to breathe around you. Ahead, the trail climbs into shadow, and somewhere beyond that shadow, the unknown shape of the new world waits. The air cools with every breath. The earth grows firm beneath your feet. And though you are alone, the quiet rhythm of your stride feels like a promise being kept. That night, you stop at the first ridge overlooking the half-drowned city. You build a small fire from dry branches and resin bark. Its glow pulls gently against the dark, and the smell of smoke rises into the still air. You eat sparingly, a handful of millet, a strip of dried fish, and sip from your flask. Above the mist, the clouds thin, revealing faint stars, their light trembling. You pick them out one by one: the archer, the river serpent, the eye of dawn. You trace their lines in the air with your finger. Somewhere behind you, the earth gives a long, distant sigh. The low thunder of a world shifting in its sleep. You draw your cloak closer and watch the fire until your eyes grow heavy. When you finally lie down, the scent of wood smoke clings to your hair, and the stars blur into slow motion above you. The world turns quietly, and you rest, not in comfort but in purpose. The fire is a faint glow when you wake. Ash breathes against the damp morning, red at its heart, pulsing like a heartbeat under suit. Beyond the ridge, mist veils the sea, and what remains of Talarin is a soft silhouette, spires bowed, roofs drowned in cloudlight. You sit up, listening. The forest murmurs drops falling from the banyan leaves, a distant rumble of shifting stone, the dry cough of wind threading through hollows. The world feels bigger this morning, wider, emptier, alive in ways it never was before. Today you will say goodbye. You pack the embers in a small clay pot lined with ash to carry with you. Fire is not easily made anymore, the air is too damp, the resin too scarce. This ember, born from Talarin's last hearth, is your tether, a small living thread of home. When you rise, your knees ache slightly. You are 24, young by the measure of your people, yet you feel older now. Not in your bones, but in the silence you carry. The mist thickens as you walk downhill. Each step brings you closer to the edges of memory, the lower terraces, the collapsed pier, the shrine to the sky ancestors at the city's heart. You stop first by the riverbank where you used to draw the tide lines for the map records. The marks are still there, shallow grooves in the rock, now smoothed by rain. You trace one with your fingertip. There were 27 lines once, each one marking the moon's pull. You remember Taryn's voice, the sea is a clock child. When it changes its rhythm, listen, something old is stirring. Now the lines mean nothing. The tide no longer keeps faith. You kneel, dig your fingers into the wet earth and scoop up a handful of clay. It smells of salt and silt, the breath of what was once alive. You mold it into a small sphere the way your mother taught you when you were small. The form of the world egg, symbol of beginnings. You press your thumb into it, leaving the mark of your print. Then you set it on the rock beside the tide grooves. The clay will dry and crumble, but the print, your print, will remain at least until the sea returns to claim it. The next place you visit is the shrine. It stands crooked now, half its stones swallowed by moss. The roof beams have fallen, the copper plates greened with age and rain. At the center still burns the faint smell of incense, though the brazier is long cold. You step inside. The air is cool, hushed, tasting faintly of iron and smoke. Once the shrine was a place of songs. Every equinox the star mappers and weavers came here to chant the names of the constellations, to ask the sky ancestors for clear skies and safe currents. You remember standing here as a child, eyes wide as the elders sang the story of the falling sun. The one that birthed the islands, the one that brought the first map. Now only the wind sings. You kneel before the central altar, a block of basalt etched with lines that once glowed faintly under starlight when oiled. You pour a few drops of lantern oil across the surface. The lines drink it slowly, and for a moment, the carvings shimmer again. There is the mark of the river serpent, coiled around the world, the twin spirals of the celestial twins, the open hand, the mapmaker's sign. You place your compass on the altar, aligning it so its obsidian needle points north. Then you take Taryn's lens disc from your pouch and lay it beside it. This city will not be forgotten, you whisper. Your stars will still speak through me. The words feel both too small and too heavy. They hang in the cool air like a promise spoken into stone. You bow deeply, not out of ritual but gratitude. When you stand again, your reflection gleams faintly in the oil, distorted, fluid, merging with the carved stars. For a heartbeat, it seems as though another face looks back, Taryn's, or perhaps one of the sky ancestors themselves, smiling through the shimmer. You blink and the illusion fades. You leave the compass there but keep the lens. One object must stay to root memory, the other must travel to seed new ones. By midday the mist begins to lift. The sky appears pale, bruised, and immense. The sun glows weakly behind the cloud veil, like an eye half open. You make your way through the lower quarter where the houses lean together, their walls black with algae. You pause before one, your mother's. The door hangs loose. Inside, the scent of dried herbs and crushed roots still lingers. You walk through slowly. On the table lies the fragment of a weaving frame. The threads are stiff, faded, but when you touch them, they hum faintly. The memory of vibration, of creation. Your mother used to say that woven things hold stories better than words. You find her old reed comb beside it and slip it into your pouch. A small relic, light enough to carry. On the back wall hangs a clay tablet painted with ochre spirals. Your first attempt at a star map when you were a child. It's crude, but when you look at it now, you can still recognize the pattern of the dawn cluster, the first constellation you ever memorized. You lift it down and run your fingers over the lines. You taught me to see, you whisper to the absent air. Now I'll teach others to remember. You leave the tablet leaning against the wall, not to take it, but to let it stay here, where it belongs, among the dust and roots. Then you walk to the back door and step out onto the terrace overlooking the drowned plain. The sea is creeping back in now, slow and deliberate. The water glints dull silver under the cloudlight, swallowing the lowest huts, the market stones, the old pier. It is beautiful in its destruction, calm, inevitable. You watch until the first wave reaches the foot of the shrine steps. It laps there hesitant, like a dog sniffing an old trail. Then another follows, higher, bolder. The sound is soft, not the crash of anger, but the sigh of return. Talarin is going under. You kneel and touch the ground one last time. The soil is warm beneath your fingers, trembling faintly. The pulse of something ancient stirring deep within. The earth remembers. you say quietly. And so will I. When you return to the ridge that evening, you build another small fire. The air is clearer now, stars piercing through the cloud veils. The constellations look sharper, closer somehow, as though the heavens have leaned nearer to watch. You take out the clay sphere you made earlier and hold it to the firelight. Its surface has begun to harden. You carve a single line across it with your obsidian flake, from pole to pole like a meridian, a reminder of the path you will take. The ember jar glows softly beside you, casting amber light across your hands. You feel the pull of sleep, but before it comes, you take out your pigment jar and a scrap of bark cloth. You begin to draw, not the city as it was, but the way it felt, the slope of the terraces, the smell of the wet reeds, the sound of wind chimes, the warmth of the lantern oil. You mark the paths of memory more than geography. When you're finished, you roll the bark cloth and tie it with twine. It will be your last map of Tala Rin, not for trade, not for teaching, but for remembrance. You place it beside your bedroll, close your eyes, and let the sounds of the night fill you, the sigh of wind through leaves, the far-off hiss of waves claiming what they were promised. Sleep comes gently, and with it dreams. You dream of the city as it was, the light of 1,000 oil lamps reflected in the harbor, the hum of people along the streets, the laughter of children chasing shadows under the moon. You see Taran at his table, marking the stars, your mother weaving, singing softly under her breath. Then the dream shifts. You are standing above the sea, but the water is no longer water. It's glass clear, trembling, filled with light. Beneath its surface float shapes, towers, bridges, and the faces of those who came before. Each one glows faintly like embers caught in the deep. You reach down, and the glass ripples. The reflection becomes sky, the constellations spinning faster, their lines crossing and reforming into new patterns. You hear a voice soft and vast, speaking in the rhythm of waves. Nothing is lost. It only changes form. Or when you wake, dawn is breaking. The light is golden clean, spilling over the ridge. The air feels cooler. The first true breath of the younger dryas descending. The world's axis has turned another notch, subtle but irreversible. You stand, stretch, and shoulder your pack. The lens disc catches the morning light, flashing briefly like a captured star. You take one last look toward the coast. Where Tala Rin stood, the water glitters, a mirror of sky. There is no smoke, no sound, only the endless shimmer of what was. It hurts less than you thought it would. Loss, when accepted, becomes a kind of clarity. You pick up your walking staff, still damp from the night dew, and begin the climb inland. The path winds between ferns and massive banyans whose roots rise like walls. The forest hums with insects and dripping leaves. Every step takes you farther from the sea and deeper into the unknown. You think of Aru, of the promise you made. Write the truth of what you see. You whisper it to yourself like a mantra. I will. And beneath that, quieter still, the earth remembers. I am her witness. That night, when you camp by a river whose waters taste faintly of stone and snowmelt, you open your map case. The pigments shimmer faintly in the lantern light. You begin to sketch the stars again, marking their new alignments. Already they have shifted, or perhaps you are seeing them more clearly now, without the smoke of the city's lights. Above, the constellations wheel, the archer bends his bow, the river serpent coils across the horizon, and the eye of dawn watches from the zenith. You make your notes carefully. You are still a cartographer, even at the edge of the world. When you finish, you lean back and stare into the fire. The clay sphere rests beside it, glowing faintly, the carved line down its center blackened by soot. It looks like a planet turning. You reach out and touch it. Somewhere in the distance a sound echoes, deep, resonant, like the first crack of ice or the shifting of continents. The Earth's memory stirring again. You do not feel fear, only awe. You add another mark to your journal, not a symbol of a city but of a beginning. Then you sleep beneath the open sky, the stars burning brighter than they ever did over Tala Rin. And in the silence between your breaths, the world begins to dream anew. The morning air holds the chill of something new. You wake before the sun fully rises, while the stars still glint between the canopy leaves like scattered fish scales in deep water. The mist clings to your hair and lashes, cool and metallic on your tongue. The embers of last night's fire have turned to pale ash. You scatter them across the damp ground, murmuring a short blessing your mother used to say, "Go where the wind carries warmth." The smoke curls upward, faint and blue. Your pack feels heavier than it did yesterday, though you have carried nothing extra. The weight now is not of things, but of distance. Tala Rin is gone, folded into the sea's sleep, and every step from here will be away from the known. You tighten the bindings of your sandals. They are woven from the tough reeds that grow near the estuary, soaked in resin and sun, dried till they turn the color of smoke. The straps bite faintly against your ankles as you rise. The first leg of your journey is not by foot but by river. The inland tribes, those who live beyond the drowned valleys, send trading canoes each season down the Naru River to exchange honey and bark cloth for obsidian and salt. You hope to find one of their boats still moored along the bend where the forest opens. You walk through the morning fog until the sound of water grows clearer, not the sea's deep exhale, but a steady inland pulse, rhythmic and patient. The Naru glides between roots and rock, its surface glass dark, catching fragments of the awakening sky. And there, half hidden among reeds, a small canoe rests, tethered by a vine rope. Its hull is carved from a single log, sealed with resin that smells faintly of pine and smoke. A woven basket sits inside, filled with gourds and a coiled net. Someone is near. A voice, quiet but sharp, calls from the mist. That's my craft. You turn, hand instinctively brushing the hilt of your obsidian knife. A figure steps into view, tall, broad-shouldered, hair bound with bark cord, eyes pale as stormlight. He carries a spear, not raised but resting against his shoulder. His skin is patterned with faint soot marks, ritual traces of ash and earth. I mean no harm, you say. I'm heading inland. I thought to trade for passage if you'll have it. He studies you a long moment, eyes flicking from your satchel to the lens, disc at your neck. You're from the coast, he says finally. Your city's gone then, you nod. The sea has taken it. Something softens in his face, not quite pity, but recognition. You can ride with me, he says at last. The current is strong this season. We'll make better time if we travel by two. You climb into the canoe, steadying yourself as the hull shifts under your weight. The man, he gives his name as Kale, pushes off from the bank with a long pole. The river takes you, smooth and sure. The mist parts ahead like a curtain. The canoe glides silently through the narrowing gorge. The sound of water brushing wood, the slow dip of Carl's paddle, the whisper of insects waking in the undergrowth. All of it folds into a rhythm older than words. The air smells of fern and wet bark, cool and dense. You breathe deeply, letting it fill you, washing away the taste of salt that still lingers from the coast. Carl speaks little. You learn through gestures, the way he nods toward a certain bird call to mark a change in weather, or taps twice on the hull when the current shifts. Once, when the river widens into a slow pool, you notice a cluster of carved posts rising from the shallows, remnants of old dwellings or markers. They tilt slightly, their tops etched with faded spirals and the symbol of the river serpent. Your people built those? You ask. He shakes his head. Older ones. Before our elders' time. We say they marked where the sky fell once. You look closer. The carvings shimmer faintly in the reflected light, like stone remembering fire. The same mark exists in Tala Rin. You murmur. The serpent that circles the world. Carl glances at you, curious but silent. For a time, neither of you speaks again. The river carries your thoughts instead. You think of Taran, of the maps you drew tracing the great waterways of Sunderland, all the lines that now end beneath the sea. And now you are on one of the few that still lives. The Naru has a slow confidence, as if it remembers its own shape even as the world shifts around it. By midday the light hardens. The mist has burned away, leaving the canopy open to a sun that gleams white through thin clouds. The air grows thick, the kind that beads on your skin and gathers at the back of your neck. Carl pulls to shore under a stand of palms. You follow, grateful for solid ground. He unpacks dried fish wrapped in leaves, and you share a small meal. You offer him millet cakes sweetened with fermented fruit. He grins, surprised at the flavor. You coastal folk eat better than us, he says. Not anymore, you reply, smiling faintly. He looks out toward the river. They say the ice is coming again. The nights are colder up north already. Animals move strange. Even the cranes flew early this season. You nod. The stars told the same story. He raises an eyebrow. You read the stars. I draw them, you answer. To help sailors find their way. To remember the order of things. He studies you as if measuring something unseen. Then maybe the river has brought you here for a reason. You both sit in the soft heat, eating slowly. The jungle hums around you. Cicadas, frogs, the occasional shriek of a distant macaque. The air smells of sap and wet moss. For a moment, it almost feels peaceful. That evening, the river narrows again, winding between cliffs streaked with red ochre. Ancient handprints mark the stone, hundreds of them, overlapping, fading into one another. You reach out to touch one as you drift past. The pigment is old but still faintly rough beneath your fingertips. Whose are they? You ask quietly. Kale shrugs. Before us. Before anyone remembers. The sight fills you with a strange calm, as if generations have passed this same bend, each leaving a sign to say we were here, we crossed. You think of your own mark on the clay sphere back at camp, the print of your thumb. Maybe that is all any map is, the memory of crossing. By nightfall the current slows. You pull to shore under a stand of tall pandanus trees whose leaves hiss softly in the wind. The air has cooled, the first breath of the coming cold season brushes your arms. You gather driftwood while Carl strikes flint. The spark catches quickly in the resinous twigs, sending thin blue smoke upward. The smell of pine and salt resin fills the small clearing. You both sit close to the fire. The warmth feels earned. Kale unwraps a small pouch and pours a fermented fruit drink into 2 clay cups. The liquid smells sharp and sweet like overripe berries and smoke. He hands one to you. To those who keep moving, he says, you raise your cup. And to those who remember why. The drink burns gently down your throat. It tastes of summer trapped in a jar. For a while, you listen to the forest. The low chatter of night birds, the steady heartbeat of the river beyond. Firelight flickers across Kale's face, carving lines of orange and shadow. He glances at you. When the sea came for your city, did anyone survive? Some fled inland, you say. Most didn't believe it would rise that far. They thought the tides were only shifting. The elders said it was a cleansing, not an ending. He nods slowly. Our elders say the earth remembers every step. Maybe she's washing her dreams clean. You stare into the fire. I've so. Then she dreams fiercely. Kale chuckles, low, not unkind. You speak like a seer. I'm only a mapmaker, you reply. But maybe the two are not so different. The conversation fades into silence. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling. You wake in the middle of the night to a sound like distant thunder. The ground trembles faintly beneath your mat. The river stirs, its current rippling. Carl sits up, listening. Another slide upriver. He murmurs. The cliffs are soft this season. You both wait until the rumbling fades. Above, the stars shimmer in clearer bands now, no longer dulled by coastal haze. You recognize the archer and the serpent, but their angles are slightly off, as though the heavens themselves are shifting their bones. You pull out your lens, disc, and align it to the horizon. The refraction tells the truth. The stars are indeed moving, subtly but unmistakably, by a fraction of a degree each night. Even the sky is restless, you whisper. Carl looks at you, puzzled, but you only smile faintly. In the flicker of the dying fire, you sketch the new positions in your barkcloth journal. The strokes are small, deliberate. This will be your first inland map, not of land, but of change itself. At dawn, the journey continues. The air has cooled further, mist clings to the water like breath. You paddle now alongside Carl, your movements slow and even. The rhythm becomes a kind of meditation. The jungle recedes gradually, giving way to open floodplain. Herds of deer like animals graze at the edges, their coats rippling bronze in the morning light. Birds spiral overhead, cranes pale and silent, flying inland. Their migration feels like a whisper of warning. You pass a cluster of people on the bank. Women washing woven mats, children chasing each other in the shallows. They raise their hands in greeting but do not speak. Their eyes follow the canoe with wary curiosity, as though sensing the edge of something vast approaching. By midday, your arms ache from paddling. The sun stands high and sharp. You and Cal beach the canoe under the shade of a fig tree and rest. The bark of the tree is smooth and cool beneath your palm, veined with sap trails. Carl stretches his back. From here the river bends north toward the mountains, he says. Beyond that, cold lands, fewer people. You nod. The mountains were marked faintly in the old coastal charts, but little was known beyond them. Then that's where I must go. He studies you. You seek something. You smile faintly. A map of what is coming, perhaps. He looks away toward the river. Then maybe you'll find it there. That night, as you make camp on a high ridge above the valley, the wind turns colder still. You wrap yourself in your reed blanket and sit beside Kale by the fire. The stars gleam hard and bright. He begins to hum, a low cyclical song without words. It vibrates softly in the chest, like the river's rhythm. You listen, then add your voice, matching his tone. The sound rises, weaves, settles. Two travelers, one song. When it fades, the silence feels full, not empty. You glance toward the horizon. The sea is far behind you now, hidden beyond folds of green and stone. Ahead the world lifts into dark shapes, the first foothills of the highlands. Tomorrow, you will begin to climb. The thought fills you with equal parts fear and wonder. You lie back watching the constellations spin their slow dance overhead. The fire pops softly beside you, throwing sparks into the air. They rise, swirl, and vanish, small lights joining the greater ones above. You breathe in the scent of wood smoke and river air, the mingled traces of sea memory and mountain promise. You are far from home, and yet, for the first time, you feel you are on the map you were always meant to draw. You wake to the sound of frost cracking. It comes from your own hair, thin crystals forming along the ends where night mist froze and now breaks as you move. The air has changed again. It tastes of stone dust and smoke, cold enough to make breath visible. Even the sound of your exhale feels sharp, like something that could be shattered if caught. The fire has gone out. Only pale ash remains and a faint, metallic scent that clings to your hands when you touch it. The others stir slowly, half dreaming, faces hollowed by fatigue. Lero's cheek is lined with dirt and salt. Saya's eyes remain closed longer than usual. The journey is beginning to weigh not just on your legs, but on the invisible center that holds you all upright. You rise, pulling your cloak close. The fabric smells of smoke and damp leather. Every stitch seems to creak with cold. For a moment, the thought of Tala Rin returns. of woven blankets drying beside a hearth, of steamed millet thick with spice. You let the memory rest there, soft as a fading ember, before turning your gaze to the land ahead. The plain you crossed last night glitters beneath morning light. The salt crusts have frozen into thin panes that crack beneath each step, revealing pockets of dark water below. You ration the remaining food carefully, 2 strips of smoked fish each, a handful of millet, and a sip of the fruit drink that has turned bitter from age. The sweetness is gone, but the warmth it brings to your stomach feels like a promise. By midday you are climbing again. The slope rises steeply toward what the others have begun to call the teeth of the world, a range of jagged hills formed by ancient coral and uplifted stone. The climb burns through every breath. Muscles ache where the cold has crept too deep. The wind lashes through crevices, singing thinly like glass being drawn across metal. When the sun reaches its height, the air shifts once more. You smell it before you feel it, that scent of iron and ash. It reminds you of obsidian being shaped in the forges of home. You press your palm against a nearby rock face. It's warm, not the warmth of sunlight, but of something beneath. The earth is breathing again. You find shelter in a half-collapsed cave that smells faintly of wet moss and animal fur. Inside, the floor is soft with ash and dry grass. You light a small fire and the smoke clings to the stone ceiling, curling like old writing. Saya leans against the wall, her skin pale, lips cracked. You offer her the last of the dried fish. She shakes her head weakly. "Keep it," she whispers. "You'll need it to draw your stars." "I can't eat the stars," you reply softly. She manages a faint smile. "You've been doing it your whole life." Her words stay with you as the night grows colder. You feed the fire with slivers of bark until only a faint glow remains. Sleep comes in short, restless bursts. In one dream, you stand again on the shore of Talarin, but the sea has risen to your chest, cold and dark. You look down and see reflections, not of stars, but of cities sinking beneath the surface, their lights dissolving like fireflies in the deep. You wake with your pulse quickened, hand on your obsidian compass. It hums faintly, a low vibration. The ground itself joins in, as if echoing the dream. You listen, and realize it's not the earth this time. It's something else, a distant rhythm. Footsteps. You crawl to the cave's edge and peer into the half-light. A figure moves along the ridge below, cloaked in skins, carrying a long staff bound with feathers. They walk with a steady, rhythmic gait, as if counting every step. You call out, softly at first, then louder. The figure stops, turns, and lifts the staff in silent acknowledgement. Slowly, they climb toward you. When they arrive, you see that they are older. A man perhaps 50 winters past, face lined deeply, hair streaked with grey and dust. Around his neck hangs a string of bone discs, polished smooth. His eyes are the pale green of shallow water. He studies you for a moment, then speaks in a dialect close enough to understand. "You are far from the sea," he says. "Too far for the scent you carry." "I follow the stars," you answer. "And the memory of a map that may no longer exist." He chuckles softly. "Then you follow ghosts." "Perhaps," you say, "but ghosts remember paths that the living forget." The man nods, settling beside the fire. He warms his hands, which are scarred and thick with callus. From a pouch he draws a bundle wrapped in leaves, roasted tubers, still warm. He tears one in half and offers it to you. The taste is sweet, earthy, grounding. You chew slowly, feeling life return to your limbs. He watches the flames. "I have seen your kind before," he murmurs. "People of the coast. You think the land is still, that only the sea moves. But the land breathes too. It shifts while you sleep." You nod. "We've felt it. The rivers change their beds overnight." Then you know the truth. The world is not ending. It is remembering. The cold will come soon. The ones who walk unprepared will turn to stone. You glance toward your companions, sleeping nearby. "How do we survive it?" The man looks at you then, not unkindly, but as though measuring something beyond flesh. "You must learn to eat the air," he says. Seeing your confusion, he adds, "The body can burn more than food. Breath keeps the fire alive." He shows you then, kneeling, palms over the belly, breathing slow and deep until steam rises from his mouth in steady rhythm. You mimic him, drawing the cold air in through your nose, letting it sink low into your body before releasing it through your mouth. At first, the cold bites sharper. Then, strangely, warmth blooms in your chest. The ache in your fingers fades. "This is what the mountain taught us," he says. "When the food is gone, the breath remains. Keep it slow. Feed the fire within." The lesson lingers. By dawn, he is gone, leaving only footprints filled with frost. But the warmth stays. You teach the others as you walk, and though they doubt, they try. Liro jokes that he feels like a sleeping bear. Saya laughs softly, the sound thin but alive. The days grow shorter. The cold becomes a presence, like an extra traveler walking beside you. Every breath leaves a ghost in the air. You wrap your feet in woven bark and grass to keep the frost from biting. The sensation of hunger becomes a companion too. Dull, persistent, whispering through the body in waves. You learn to move within it, to listen when it tightens, to rest when it eases. One afternoon, as you cross a high plateau, the wind carries a strange sound, a low hum, almost musical. The ground beneath your feet vibrates faintly, echoing it. You realize the sound is not from above, but below. You kneel, pressing your ear to the soil. Beneath the frozen crust flows water, unseen, trapped, rushing towards some unknown destination. Life beneath death, motion beneath stillness. You smile, feeling your heartbeat match its rhythm. At night, when the others sleep, you study the stars again. They have shifted further still. The spear now points where the river once lay. You adjust your chart, hands trembling slightly from cold. Each correction feels like erasing part of what was once true. And yet, in the new alignments, you begin to sense a pattern, not of loss but of guidance. Perhaps the stars are not drifting away, but bending towards something yet unseen. On the seventh night after meeting the mountain man, a storm comes. The wind rises first, a deep, moaning wind that rolls across the plain like a tide. You tie the tent cloth down, fingers numb. Snow follows, dry and fast, filling the air with spinning ghosts. It stings the eyes and coats the lashes. The fire dies within moments. You huddle close, bodies pressed for warmth, breath clouding between faces. The storm lasts through dawn. When it clears, the world is white. The landscape that had been dark stone and dust is gone, replaced by a smooth expanse stretching to the horizon. Silence reigns. No bird, no wind. Only your own heartbeat. You rise, brushing snow from your cloak. Each step sinks deep, leaving hollow impressions that fill quickly with fine powder. The cold burns the skin raw. But beneath it, beneath the ache, the shivering, the exhaustion, there is clarity. The land seems reborn, as though offering itself anew for those who can endure its silence. Leroy stumbles once, nearly falling. You catch his arm. "We keep moving," you say gently, slowly. He nods, eyes glazed with fatigue. "Aisha," he mutters, "do you think the stars see us?" You glance upward, where the sun hides behind thin cloud. "I think they remember us," you whisper. That's enough. By midday, you find a sheltered hollow among boulders. The air here is still, and the snow less deep. You rest, sharing the last of the millet, a handful divided into three. It tastes of earth and smoke. You chew slowly, eyes half closed, feeling its quiet strength spread through you. As you sit there, a faint movement catches your eye. Across the snow, a line of prints winds away into the distance, too large for a deer, too regular for any wandering animal. They lead toward the northern ridges. Another traveler. Saya murmurs, following your gaze. Or something older, Lero adds quietly. You study the prints, then the horizon. The idea of another presence, human or otherwise, stirs both fear and comfort. You pack your gear and rise. "Wa follow," you say simply. The climb is slow. Each step presses through layers of snow, crust and hidden ice. Your breath becomes visible in rhythmic clouds marking time. The footprints lead to a cliff edge overlooking a wide basin below. There, in the distance, you see it, a faint column of smoke rising straight and unwavering. A settlement perhaps, survivors, or the memory of fire itself. The wind shifts, carrying a faint scent, wood smoke, yes, but mingled with something else, sweet, resinous, familiar, the scent of home. You stand there a long moment, heart steady, body aching, breath deep. Behind you, the land stretches silent and white, endless as the stars above. Before you, the promise of warmth flickers faintly through the haze. You tighten your cloak, touch the compass at your neck, its obsidian face cold and smooth, and take the first step downward. Each breath burns now, but you know what the old man meant. The fire inside endures, and though the world grows colder, your spirit does not. The wind carried the scent of copper and rot as Asher guided the skiff across the shallows where Talarin's lower streets had once glimmered like mirrors. Now the sea stretched unbroken, a grey-green plain studded with the tops of drowned roofs and the ghostly tips of palms that once lined the harbour. The surface trembled with fine mist, and beneath it, through water clear as glass, Asher could see the faint white geometry of walls, foundations and avenues that had once held her childhood steps. She felt her hand tighten on the oar. The world she had mapped was gone, but the stars above, they had not changed. Or had they? Above her, the night sky wavered like molten metal. The constellations had slipped from their places, their angles warped by strange refractions she could not name. Her charts no longer matched the heavens. When she traced them in her mind, the cross of the river, the fisher's net, the sister lanterns, each had drifted slightly east. She turned to Kylan, seated at the bow, his obsidian spear resting across his knees. "The stars are wrong," she said quietly. He did not look up. "Maybe we are wrong," he murmured. That silence between them stretched. The sea made soft sounds, sighs, murmurs, like breathing through teeth. Asher glanced back at the shore they'd left. Smoke still rose from the fires of the inland camps. Behind the ridges, the world trembled with distant thunder that did not come from storms. At dawn they found what they were searching for, a ridge of coral and limestone rising from the sea like the spine of a buried beast. It had not been here before the sea withdrew. The waters must have peeled away layers of sand and revealed it anew. The crest was veined with strange carvings, glyphs that shimmered faintly when wet, as if their stone remembered light. Asha leaned over the side and traced one shape with her fingers. It was a spiral nested inside another, an unending loop of motion. She had seen it once before, carved into the star stones of the old observatory. "This place is older than Tala Rin," she whispered, "older than all the settlements on the coast." The Kylan crouched beside her. "The elders spoke of a city beneath the sea," he said, "a place built when the earth was warm and the stars burned lower. They said it was swallowed for its pride." She smiled faintly. "They said many things." Still, her hand shook as she ran her fingers along the spiral. The grooves were smooth, not eroded by time, but preserved as if sealed within the stone until now. The glyph pulsed faintly. Kylan recoiled. "Did you see?" "Less." They waited. The sea was utterly still. Then the ridge gave a deep groan, like breath moving through a sleeping body. Fine streams of bubbles rose from the cracks. The water around them trembled, and a low hum filled the air. Not sound but pressure, felt in the teeth and bones. Asha's eyes widened. The stone remembers. By midday, the tide had fully turned. The water receded farther, exposing a vast shelf of coral and basalt stretching into the mist. The ridge they'd followed descended into a half-collapsed archway leading downward, a submerged passage now open to the air. Asha's heart hammered. She could not explain why, but she felt as if she had stood here before, in another life or dream. Kylan watched her. "If we go down there, we might not come back." "We already haven't," she replied. "Everything we were is gone." They packed only what they could carry: obsidian knives, reed torches coated with resin, a clay jar of fermented water fruit. Then they descended. The passage walls were carved with the same spirals and constellations, though these were sharper, more deliberate. The work of minds who mapped not just the heavens but the motions of the deep. Asha's torchlight caught on shapes that seemed to move when she wasn't looking, figures of humans with elongated skulls, hands lifted toward the sky, lines of power connecting them to stars above and waters below. As they moved deeper, the air grew cooler, filled with the mineral scent of salt and something older. The ground sloped downward until they reached a wide chamber half flooded with brackish water. In its center rose a dais of black stone shaped like an eye. Asha approached it slowly. The air around it shimmered faintly as if distorted by heat. "This is it," she whispered. "A map room." Kylan frowned. "What look?" She pointed. On the floor around the dais, etched in gleaming silver lines, were the outlines of continents, not as they knew them, but as they might have been in another age. Lands joined by shallow seas. Great rivers that no longer existed. "It's the world," she said, awe breaking her voice. "But not as it is. As it was." She knelt and traced one line. A long peninsula stretching from the heart of the great ocean. It led straight toward the place that would become Sunderland. At her touch, the silver brightened. Kylan stepped back. "Asha." But the light was already spreading, crawling outward like veins of living metal. The chamber thrummed, and the surface of the black days rippled, first like water, then like glass. Images formed. The stars above rotated, faster, until they blurred into spirals. Then came visions: mountains cracking, glaciers melting, floods rushing across plains. The seas rose, swallowing coasts and islands. Through it all, lights pulsed deep beneath the waves, as if something vast and ancient stirred there. Asha gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's showing the remembering," she whispered, "the earth dreaming backward." When the vision faded, Asha collapsed beside the dais. Kylan caught her, but she was trembling too hard to speak. The lines on the floor were dim again, but she could still see after images in her mind. Shapes of lands long vanished, stars shifted in slow dance. "The elders said the earth remembers what we forget," Kylan murmured. "Maybe this is its memory." Asha looked at the carvings around them. "No," she said softly. "This was made by people. They wanted us to find it, when the time came again." She looked up at the ceiling. Through cracks in the stone, faint rays of light filtered down, and for an instant, just before she looked away, she thought she saw shapes moving beyond the rock. Fluid, luminous, like figures walking beneath water. By nightfall they returned to the surface. The tide had changed again, rising faster than before. Already the ridge was half submerged. The air vibrated faintly with that same hum they had felt below. Asha stood in the skiff, watching the sun dip toward the sea. "The land will not last another moon," she said. Kylan nodded. "Then where do we go?" She turned toward the west, where the sea met the mist, where faint lights shimmered like distant fires. "To where the stars are still true," she said. He smiled grimly. "You and your stars. They're all we have left," she replied. As the boat drifted from the ridge, she looked back once more. The sea swallowed the last of the carvings, leaving only ripples and bubbles where stone had once been. And beneath the waves, faintly glowing, She thought she saw the spiral still burning, pulsing like a heartbeat, waiting for someone else to remember. The storms had begun to speak in tongues. Their voices rolled over the sea like the calls of mourning gods, low, melodic, ancient. Asha could feel them in her ribs as she and Kaelan guided the skiff westward across what had once been farmland, now a drowned tapestry of pale grass and black roots visible beneath the clear water. Every few hours, lightning spidered through distant clouds, illuminating shapes that could have been ruins or waves. She could no longer tell where land ended and ocean began. The world was unraveling in silence. The birds that once nested along the coast had vanished inland. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, as if afraid to disturb what was ending. Asha sat at the prow, one hand resting on the obsidian compass, the other shading her eyes from the sun. "The current's shifting," she said. "It's not right for this time of season." Kaelan's jaw tightened. Nothing is right anymore. They had been at sea for 6 days. Behind them, the mountains of their homeland were now ghost, blue humps at the edge of the horizon. Ahead, open water, dappled with patches of floating reeds and dead trees carried from the floods. Still, Asha's charts urged her west. She followed the stars that remained unbroken, the belt of the hunter, the tail of the sea cow. Though even those flickered faintly at night, as if the heavens themselves were dimming. "The stars don't lie," she whispered, though doubt was gnawing her calm. Kaelan heard. "Maybe they're just forgetting us." By the 8th day they reached a field of stone pillars rising from the sea like drowned fingers. Some stood straight, others leaned drunkenly, their surfaces carved with the same looping spirals and star lines Asha had seen beneath the waves. Kaelan slowed the skiff. "Another ruin." "No," Asha murmured, eyes narrowing. "I calendar." She leaned over the side, running her hand across a pillar as they passed. The grooves were filled with silt and algae, but the shapes were unmistakable. Constellations mapped in sequences, the same pattern repeated at intervals along each column. "These were meant to mark the years," she said. "To watch the sky's breath." Kaelan frowned. "Then why are they out here?" "Because the sea wasn't here once." She gestured toward the deep, green-blue plain stretching in all directions. This was land, a valley of temples, the drowned plains. He stared, silent. She continued softly, "If my maps are true, this place once connected the old lands, islands joined by rivers and marshes. A cradle. The cradle of who?" Asha looked down at the spirals. "Maybe of everyone." They anchored beside a half-submerged platform, smooth black stone, etched with a ring of symbols. When Asha knelt, she found her reflection warped by faint lines of light running through the stone like veins. "The rock still remembers," she murmured, "even after the flood." Kaelan crouched beside her, his expression wary. "You think this is what the earth remembering looks like?" She smiled faintly, or dreaming. He studied her a moment longer, then said quietly, "You haven't slept in 2 days." "I can't," she admitted. "Every time I close my eyes I see the spiral again. But it's changing, it's opening." "Opening to what?" Asha didn't answer. Her gaze had drifted to the horizon, where the water shimmered like molten glass. That night the sea grew still, unnaturally so. The air thickened until each breath felt like swallowing smoke. Asha woke to find the water around their skiff glowing faintly, shot through with blue veins of light that coiled and drifted like living things. "Kaelan," she whispered. He was already awake, spear in hand, staring into the dark. Shapes were moving beneath the surface, long, slow, deliberate. Not fish, not whales, something older. The lights within the water pulsed in rhythm with their movement, like heartbeats. "They're following us," Kaelan said. Asha leaned forward. "No, they're guiding us." Before he could answer, the skiff began to drift. Not by wind or current, but as if drawn by invisible threads. The water parted silently ahead, forming a path of shimmering blue. Kaelan gripped the edge of the boat. "Asha, it's all right," she said, though her voice trembled. "They're leading us to something." The path wound through the pillars and down into a vast basin, where the sea's glow thickened into mist. In the center of it rose a single black spire, tall as a mountain, its tip barely breaking the surface. Asha's breath caught. The axis. She had seen it before, not with her eyes but in the visions from the map room. It was the heart of the old world, the place where the sky and sea once touched. Kaelan shook his head. "You mean this was real?" "Yes," she whispered. "All of it was." They moored the skiff at the base of the spire, where the stone curved outward into a platform slick with moss. Runes circled its edge, not carved but burned into the surface, glowing faintly like embers. Asha knelt and placed her palm against them. A shock of warmth ran up her arm, and then she heard it, a voice without sound, speaking not to her ears but her bones. It was not language, not exactly, more like a pattern, a rhythm. But she understood. The earth was remembering, and it was remembering her. The vision came like floodwater. She saw cities that shimmered like glass under twin suns, towers rising from coral reefs, ships gliding not on water but on air thick with light. She saw people, her people, standing beneath the same stars, their faces aglow with wonder and fear. They charted the heavens, built machines of crystal and bronze, and sang to the earth in frequencies that moved stone itself. Then came fire, a roar from the sky, the comet's heart striking the ice, 1,000 winters born in one day. The seas rising, the winds screaming, mountains collapsing into ash. Asha saw herself standing among them, or someone who could have been her, lifting a lens of crystal toward the stars as the world burned. When the vision faded, she fell to her knees gasping. Kylan was beside her instantly, his hand on her shoulder. "What did you see?" She looked up at him, eyes filled with tears and firelight. "Yes," she whispered, "all of us," before the forgetting. For hours after, she said nothing. They sat in silence at the base of the spire while the sea murmured softly around them. The glowing lights beneath the surface had dispersed, fading back into the dark. Finally, Kylan spoke. "If the earth remembers us, what does it want?" Asha's fingers traced the air as if writing invisible shapes. "To wake us," he frowned. "And if waking means ending?" She turned to him, her voice low. "Then maybe ending is part of remembering." As dawn broke, a low rumble shook the sea. The horizon darkened, the water began to churn violently. From far to the east, a wall of mist was rising. No, not mist, water. Asha stood slowly, heart pounding. "The flood," she said. Kylan followed her gaze. "We won't outrun that." "No," she agreed, gripping the side of the skiff. "But maybe we don't need to." He stared at her, eyes wide. "Asha." She smiled faintly, the wind whipping her hair across her face. "The world is remembering, Kylan, and we are its memory." The roar grew louder, a thunder of worlds colliding. As the first shadow of the wave reached them, Asha lifted her obsidian compass high. Its glass caught the sun and burst into light. For an instant, everything froze, sea, sky, and air, as if the earth itself were holding its breath. Then the light swallowed them whole. The sea is quieter now. You wake to the sound of your own breathing, slow and shallow, the faint creak of reeds brushing against the skiff's hull. The horizon is pale, bruised with lavender light. Kylan's cloak lies where he left it, folded with deliberate care near the prow, though he himself is gone, claimed by the flood, or by the choice to turn back. You do not weep. Your eyes sting from salt and sleeplessness, but your body moves with a steadiness that feels borrowed from something older than you. You lean forward, dip your hand into the cold water, and taste it. The brine burns your cracked lips. The world is stripped bare. You can smell it, the metallic tang of silt, the rot of drowned wood, the faint sweetness of distant rain. Above, gulls circle soundlessly, their shadows drifting across the rippling blue. Somewhere beneath you lie the submerged bones of villages, their fire pits and clay jars filled now with sand and memory. You whisper, almost reverently, "I'm still here." The wind answers with a long sigh, like a sleeping beast shifting in its rest. When you push the skiff onward, the effort feels clean, almost ritualistic. The paddle dips, the water parts, the boat slides forward. Each stroke becomes a heartbeat, each breath a small vow. You keep Kylan's cloak folded beside you, weighted by the obsidian compass. Its edge catches the morning light, fractured into small rainbows across your hand. You remember what the elders once told you, that when someone leaves this world, their patterns remain, woven into the tides, the air, the hum of the stars. You do not have to search for Kylan now, he is already everywhere. Your fingers tighten on the paddle. If the world is remembering, then so will you. By midday, you reach the edge of what used to be a forest. The trees rise like pillars from the shallows, trunks stripped of bark, silver grey, their roots grasping at nothing. Between them, flocks of dragonflies shimmer, their wings catching droplets of sun. You beach the skiff among the roots, stretch your stiff limbs, and climb onto a low ridge where a few stones remain stacked in deliberate order. They are small, these remnants of thought. Someone built this place, perhaps long before your grandparents were born. A fire circle, a marker, a memory. You kneel, brush the lichen away, and there, beneath the green, find a carved spiral. Your breath catches. It is the same spiral that marked the temple floor in Talarin. The sight steadies you. It tells you that your people were not scattered by accident, that this pattern, this echo, binds you still. You sit there for a long time, tracing the groove with one fingertip, until the sun dips lower and the air cools against your skin. Night finds you again. You light a small fire from driftwood and resin scraped from a dead tree. The smoke rises blue and sharp. The scent reminds you of home, of clay ovens and smoked fish, of Kylan's quiet laughter over a pot of millet stew. For a moment, it hurts to remember. Then it softens into something like peace. The flames crackle gently. You take out your star map, the one you've guarded since the night of the withdrawal tide. It is creased now, water-stained, but the constellations are still legible. You lift your crystal lens, tilt it toward the heavens and search. The stars look wrong. The air trembles with cold. Yet as you adjust your focus, one small cluster comes into view, the hunter's belt, faint but there. You align it to the map's markings, note its drift toward the horizon, and understand the sky itself is moving differently now. The Earth's axis has shifted. The world you knew is tilting into a new age. You mark the change carefully. The gesture is small, but it fills you with quiet wonder. Even as the land drowns, knowledge can survive. When dawn arrives, a stranger's voice breaks the silence. Cartographer. You turn sharply. A man stands at the water's edge, wrapped in a cloak made of woven reeds, his face streaked with clay to ward off insects. Behind him, 2 children watch you, their eyes wide but curious. The man nods toward the spiral stones. You found one of the old places, he says. His voice is rough as though unused to speech. You incline your head cautiously. You knew it was here. He smiles faintly. My people fish these waters. We tell stories of light that rises from the deep here. None of us dared come close. You glance toward the submerged roots, where the last glow of the morning touches the water's surface. It remembers. You say. The man studies you for a moment, then gestures for you to follow. Come. There are others inland who might remember too. You travel together for 2 days through the shallows and rising swamps. The man, his name is Caro, speaks of inland fires, of herds migrating too early, of salt creeping into the wells. He shows you how to move through reed beds without stirring leeches, how to dry fish using only sun and smoke, how to sleep light so that the sound of frogs can become a measure of safety. You listen, learning each detail with quiet gratitude. When he sees your compass, he asks, what does it measure? The pull between places. You answer. He nods, understanding more than you expected. Then keep it close. The world is losing its edges. By the time you reach the high marshlands, the air is cooler, thinner. The trees grow gnarled and sparse, and the ground hums faintly beneath your feet. Caro's children walk ahead, collecting shell fragments from the mud. Each one glints like glass when cleaned. You pause at a ridge. From here you can see the sea stretching far below. A vast, silver plain where your old home used to be. The distance feels enormous, yet you can still smell the salt, still taste it in the wind. You whisper to yourself, all of this will sleep beneath water soon. And then, quieter, but that night, by another fire, you open your map again. The stars seem closer here, framed between dark clouds. You draw new lines, connecting unfamiliar constellations. The pattern that emerges is strange but harmonious, like a song you half remembered and finally recalled. Caro watches you work. You draw paths through the sky, he says softly. You nod. Paths don't always stay the same, but their rhythm. You pause, searching for the right word. Their rhythm remembers. He smiles, tending the flame. Then maybe rhythm is what keeps us alive. You feel the truth of it. The paddle's rhythm, the tide's rhythm, the steady beat of your heart when all else fails. You look up at the stars again. For the first time since Kaelan vanished, you feel not fear, but a kind of gentle awe. The world is vast, yes, but not empty. Every sound, every shimmer, every breath belongs to something still becoming. Later, when the others sleep, you take Kaelan's cloak from your pack. The fabric smells faintly of smoke and salt. You fold it carefully and tuck it beneath your head before lying back on the cool ground. The fire's glow dances across the inside of your eyelids. You think of the drowned plains, the glowing spire, the voice that wasn't a voice. You think of how small your body feels, and yet how ancient your hands look in the firelight. The earth is shifting, remaking itself, but so are you. For the first time, you understand survival isn't about keeping the past alive. It's about carrying its pattern forward, changed but unbroken. You whisper to the night, I will remember. The wind stirs softly through the reeds, carrying your vow away. It moves like breath, like the ocean's pulse returning to its rhythm. And as sleep takes you, you imagine the sea rising again, not as a threat, but as an embrace. In the deep you see the spiral uncoiling, not to destroy, but to begin again. You are no longer afraid of the water. You are part of its remembering. The sea had not yet swallowed Talarin, but it was coming for her. Each morning the tide arrived higher, creeping up the polished stairs of the harbour where once the market children had played. Clay jars of smoked eel floated away from their shelves. The air smelled of salt and ferment, like the mouth of a dying god. Asha stood on the eastern bluff, her hair in tangles from sleepless nights, watching the sun rise over a horizon that no longer stayed still. The colour of the dawn had changed. It was redder, thicker, a haze of suspended dust or soot. The sky turned molten from something burning far to the north. Behind her, the priests of the lens carried their last star, crystals out of the observatory. Wrapped in sea silk, the lenses looked like orbs of captured lightning. They were taking them inland to higher ground, where they hoped to rebuild a chamber to track the heavens that would soon vanish beneath the waves. Asha was supposed to join them, but her feet would not move. She had seen too much. The lines that no one else could read. In the last nights, she had mapped the stars with trembling fingers, and the heavens themselves seemed to bend in answer. The constellations had shifted faster than her ancestors' records ever warned of. The north fire, once steady, now pulsed like a wounded heart, and the southern line, the path of the twin serpents, was broken entirely. When she showed her master, Elder Luran, the old man had gone quiet. "This is not drift," he whispered. "This is memory." "What do you mean?" she had asked. He touched her star slate, the obsidian surface veined with pale dust. "The heavens remember the wound below. As above, so below. The earth's pulse and the skies are one. You are seeing the earth think again." She did not understand then. Now, as the bluff trembled underfoot, she began to. By noon, the outer quarter of the city was gone. Asher watched from the inland ridge as the great temple domes sank one by one, the copper finials vanishing beneath the green-grey surge. The screams of people and animals became a single sound, not a panic anymore, but of something more ancient. A tone that shuddered in the bone. She thought of the old myths, that the sea once spoke words, and the first humans learned to shape their tongues by imitating its waves. Maybe this was the sea's last speech. Maybe it was saying, "Remember me." Asher's hands clutched the satchel on her shoulder. Inside, wrapped in reed cloth, were her last maps. One of the stars, one of the coast, and one she had not dared show anyone, the lattice of stone lights beneath the waterline. It was that hidden pattern she had traced on the last night before the storm, when she and the divers had gone down to the old causeway. They'd found pillars carved with symbols so worn they seemed older than memory, spirals, arrows, eyes. When the lantern light struck them, they had flickered faintly, as if the symbols themselves were made to reflect the constellations above. That was when she began to understand Tala Rin had not been built first. It had been rebuilt. Beneath the drowned plazas lay a city far older, aligned to a sky that no longer existed. At dusk, Asher reached the inland sanctuary of the Lenses. The hill there was crowded with survivors, farmers, fisherfolk, and children carrying what tools they could save. Smoke rose from dozens of small fires, curling into a twilight already dimmed by ash. Elder Luran sat among the stones, his face drawn but calm. When he saw Asher, he beckoned her near. "You stayed too long," he said. "I had to see," she replied. "Then tell me what you saw." She unwrapped her hidden map. The elder's eyes widened at the symmetry. The Underseer ruins mirrored the pattern of the heavens she had drawn earlier, the lost constellations forming a wheel of correspondence. He ran his fingers over the inked lines. "So it was true," he murmured. The city below was their first mirror, the one built when the stars burned lower and the air was thick with fire. "You mean the sky ancestors?" Luron nodded slowly. "Yes, the ones who taught our ancestors how to measure time by the heavens. But they did not come from above. They came before. We remembered them as sky walkers because they vanished into the air, into legend. But they were of the earth, and the earth buried them." Asher stared at him. "You're saying there was a world before ours?" He smiled sadly. "There is always a world before. The earth sleeps and wakes, and with each dawn, memory becomes myth." That night, the survivors lit their last fires in a ring around the sanctuary. The air trembled with a low, unending rumble, the sound of collapsing coasts, the drowning of forests. Asher sat apart, looking up at the stars. Half of them were gone behind the drifting veil. The others seemed closer now, as if leaning down to look at their reflection in the darkened sea. She thought of what Luran had said, that memory sleeps in stone and water. Maybe that was why she could not turn away. She needed to see what the world was trying to remember. When the others slept, she descended the ridge once more, carrying her lens and her maps. She followed the retreating tide down the ravaged beach, where the sand was streaked with black glass and the air smelled of lightning. Far offshore, something glimmered beneath the waves, a line of faint blue light, like a road calling her name. She waded in, the cold seizing her breath. The stars above spun, their reflections crossing the lines below. For a moment she could not tell which was which, sky or sea, reflection or reality. And then she saw it. The lights formed a spiral, the same as on the pillars below the causeway, the same as the whirlpool carved on the oldest temple walls. Asher lifted her lens. The crystal refracted the light into hundreds of tiny beams, and in that pattern she saw faces, human and not, eyes of fire and water, mouths whispering through the flood. It was not madness, it was memory awakening. The earth was remembering itself, and she was part of that memory. The world had drowned its own reflection. Asher drifted through the shallows of the vanished harbor, each stroke of her hands stirring clouds of silt that glowed faintly in the refracted starlight. The waters were warmer than they should have been, almost feverish, alive with a strange inner light that pulsed and faded like breath. The spiral of blue she had seen from the shore extended below her now, an enormous pattern etched into the drowned stone. Each curve was lined with faintly luminous tiles, their edges crusted with coral, their centers engraved with signs that hummed when she passed near. She paused to rest her hand against one. The vibration went through her bones, not sound, she realized. Memory. Her master's words came back. The earth remembers. If so, then she was swimming through the earth's dream. the dream of an age too old for the tongue of any living tribe. She surfaced for air near the remnants of a rooftop that had once been the temple of wind offerings. The carved birds at its corners still reached skyward, though their wings were now draped with kelp. The moonlight gleamed off their eyes of shell. Beneath her, she could see deeper into the spiral, a central shaft descending into darkness. The pattern called to her. She tied the lens to her chest, took one last breath, and dove. The descent was longer than she expected. The water turned colder, then warmer again. The light grew steadier, as if she were entering the heart of something that generated its own glow. At the spiral's center, the floor fell away. The tiles here were perfect still, no coral, no cracks, no age. It was as though they had been built yesterday. And in the middle stood a sphere, vast, crystalline, suspended above the ground by nothing she could see. Within it, shadowed forms drifted like fish in amber. Asha hovered there, her lungs burning, unable to look away. The forms inside the sphere moved slowly, but with intent. Their shapes neither fully human nor fully other. Faces elongated, eyes too wide, limbs jointed differently. One turned toward her, and the glow within the sphere flared. The light struck her lens, refracted, and shot outward into 1,000 threads that wrapped around her body. She felt her heart stop, not from fear, but from recognition. The same pattern she had traced in the stars was now written across her skin. Then everything went white. When she woke, she lay on smooth stone, dry, though she knew she had been deep underwater. The air was thick, humming faintly with a vibration that seemed to shape itself into words. "You carry the memory." Asha's head jerked up. The voice was not spoken aloud, it was in her mind, clear as her own thoughts. "Who speaks?" she asked silently. "The ones who were before, the builders of the first mirror." She looked around. The sphere stood above her still, but now it was hollow, filled with rippling light instead of shadow. Shapes danced within it, landscapes, stars, vast oceans freezing and thawing. "Why show me this?" "Because you have remembered. The others forgot." You drew the old lines again. Asha's pulse raced. "What are you?" The light shifted, forming outlines, towers, canals, floating ships, a civilization vast beyond imagining. Then came the collapse of storms, fire from the sky, and ice swallowing everything. "We were those who mapped the heavens and the deep. We tried to hold the world's rhythm in balance, but the pulse failed. The stars turned, the seas rose, memory sank into water, and now," she whispered, "now the cycle begins again. The remembering returns." Asha felt tears burn her eyes. "What can I do?" The sphere dimmed, and one final image flared. A ring of stones above a plain of ice, and at its center, a single lens like hers, glowing with inner light. "Carry the fire north," said the voice. "Before the ice claims the sky again." The vibration faded. The water began to seep in through unseen cracks. The sphere cracked once, twice, and shattered into silence. Asha scrambled to her feet. The flood was rising fast, the memory collapsing back into dream. She clutched her lens and swam upward through the ruin, following the path of the spiral as it dissolved beneath her. She broke the surface just as dawn began, a dawn the color of copper and blood. By midday she had climbed the ridge again, soaked, half delirious. Elder Luron was gone. The camp had scattered inland, only the fire circles and a few burned posts remained. She stood alone, holding the lens against the sun. Its light refracted into the shape of a path leading north, not a road but a direction in her bones. Behind her the sea devoured the last of Tala Rin. Ahead the jungle rose toward misted mountains, and beyond those perhaps, the plain of ice where the builder's stones still stood waiting. She did not look back. Asha began to walk. You walk north beneath a sky that no longer trusts itself. The air is raw and shimmering, the scent of wet ash mingling with something metallic. A taste that lingers at the back of your tongue like struck stone. For days, you have followed the river that flows against the light, its water milky with silt and melt. The lens you carry swings against your chest, faintly warm, pulsing in rhythm with your heart. At night, when the wind falls still, you hear the earth sigh, deep, slow tectonic. The land is changing beneath your feet. The hills where the forest once breathed are now streaked with pale streaks of frost. Ferns collapse under their own weight. Birds vanish between dawn and dusk. You find prints in the mud, some belonging to deer, others to no creature you know. Still, you keep moving. The voice from the sphere has not returned, yet the pull within you is constant like the undertow of a dream. Northward, toward the edge of ice. You make camp in a hollow of rock near a smoking vent. The heat rising through the cracks smells of sulfur, but it keeps you alive. You dry your tunic on a branch and watch steam curl into constellations. When the stars appear, you see them differently now. Their lines have shifted, the sky's map distorted. You trace the old patterns with your finger and realize the heavens themselves are moving faster than before. From your pack, you take a strip of bark and scratch new coordinates with a flake of obsidian. The stars once guided sailors between the islands of Tala Rin. Now they seem to whisper only of endings. Your breath fogs the air. Somewhere in the darkness a creature bellows, long, low, and full of sorrow. You whisper back, "I hear you." The sound drifts away, carried north. On the fourth morning, you meet others. A cluster of wanderers huddled around a dying fire, men, women, a child with ash-smudged cheeks. Their clothes are layered hides and woven reeds, their faces salt-burned. They watch you as you approach, mistrust in their eyes until they see the lens glinting from your chest. An old man rises first, his left arm ends at the elbow, bound with frayed cloth. "You come from the sea?" he asks in a tongue close to your own but heavier with the rhythm of inland speech. You nod. "From the city that drowned." A murmurs ripple through them. A woman covers her mouth. "The elders said it was a story," she whispers. "No one could live through that." You sit by their fire and share a little of your smoked fish. The old man leans closer, his breath thick with resin. "We saw lights on the water," he says. "Red, blue, green. We thought it was the gods." "Not gods," you say softly. "Memories." He frowns, uncomprehending, but does not argue. Later, as the others sleep, he comes to sit beside you again. "The river ahead is broken," he says. "The ice moved last moon. It took half our people. If you go north, you'll need to cross the dead plain." You nod once. "Then I will cross it." He studies you. You speak as if something calls you. It does, you admit. He stares into the fire. "Then listen carefully. When the land begins to sing at night, you must not stop to sleep. That is when the ice shifts. Many have died dreaming." You thank him. Before dawn, when the stars fade, you rise and leave quietly. He does not try to stop you. The river turns to mist as you climb higher. Frost flowers bloom on the stones, delicate as breath. You wrap your cloak tighter and feel the lens pulse again. Steady now, guiding. Each day grows colder, but inside you something burns brighter. You no longer hunger as before, your body has learned to eat silence. By the sixth night, snow begins to fall. The flakes are dry, sharp-edged, whispering like sand across your skin. You find shelter beneath an overhang, and with trembling hands you strike sparks from stone. The fire comes alive on the third try. It flickers low, uncertain, a fragile heartbeat in the storm's throat. You feed it slivers of bark and shards of resin, coaxing it to breathe. You watch the light grow, and your thoughts drift to Elder Luron, to the long nights in Talarin where he taught you the mathematics of the sky, his voice gentle as tidewater. You see again the old maps drawn in ochre and ash, the delicate curves that foretold not only the stars but also time itself. He had said once, "The map is not to find your way, Asher. It is to remember that you have one." You smile faintly, feeling warmth return to your hands. The fire's rhythm matches your heartbeat. You lean closer and see the reflection of your own eyes in the flames, and behind them, a pattern of light that is not entirely human. It frightens you for only a moment. Then it feels right. At dawn, you find the plain. The world opens into white silence. The horizon disappears into itself. You cannot tell where the sky ends or the ground begins. The air is so cold it sings, a faint crystalline hum like wind across glass. This must be what the old man meant. The land singing. You tighten your cloak and step forward. Hours blur. Time loses edges. You walk by the rhythm of your breath, one step, one exhale, one heartbeat. Sometimes in the corner of your vision, shapes move, not beasts, not people, but shadows of memory, pillars, domes, walls of light rising from the snow. When you turn to look, they vanish. You begin to understand that you are walking not only through space, but through the ghost of what once was. Then, in the far distance, a shimmer appears, a circle of stones, half buried in frost. Your pulse quickens. You feel the lens on your chest grow hot. You run, stumbling through drifts that swallow your legs. When you reach the stones, the air inside the ring is strangely still, as if the wind refuses to enter. The ground beneath you hums faintly, matching the pulse of the lens. You kneel and place the crystal at the circle's center. The hum deepens, a resonance so low it seems to vibrate your bones. The snow around the stones begins to melt, revealing engravings. Spirals, lines, constellations you know and others you do not. The light builds slowly. The air thickens. You feel heat spreading from the ground, and for the first time in weeks, the cold lifts from your body. The fire is not of wood or resin. It is born from memory, the earth itself exhaling warmth. You sit in the middle of the ring, hands open, breath steady. The flame that rises is pale, nearly colorless. It dances without sound, without smoke. The lens dissolves into it, melting like ice in dawnlight. You do not flinch. Something ancient stirs within you, not words, but knowing. The builders' voices are gone now. Their task was to wake what lay buried. And that awakening is within you. You realize with quiet certainty that this is not the end of the world. It is only the turn. The first ice, the first forgetting, the first remembering. You close your eyes and let the heat wash through you. When you open them again, the storm has passed. The snow is soft, luminous. You rise light-headed but calm. In the distance, you see smoke, faint trails rising from valleys below, survivors, others like you, carrying the ember forward. You take one deep breath, feeling the fire still alive in your chest. and begin walking toward them. The wind behind you carries a new sound, not the hum of the ice but the soft crackle of thaw. The thaw is quiet. You wake to the sound of dripping, soft, steady, almost musical. The frost that once lined your cloak has melted into beads of water. The sun is pale, diffused behind clouds that glow from within, as if the sky itself is remembering warmth. You breathe deeply. The air tastes faintly of iron and pine sap, the scent of things growing again. Beneath your boots, the ground is softening. The rigid crust of the plain has turned to a dark, pliant earth. The fire that rose from the stones is gone, but its memory lingers in you. It flickers behind your ribs. Not a flame now, but a steady warmth, an awareness that hums in rhythm with your pulse. You begin walking north again, though the compass of your mind no longer points in one direction. The path is not a line, it is a widening. By the third day you reach the valley you saw from the ring of stones. The smoke you'd glimpsed belongs to a cluster of shelters, half tents, half caves carved into the slopes where ice has receded. As you draw closer, voices reach you low, cautious, human. Children's laughter faint but real. You step into their camp slowly, hands visible, cloak heavy with thawed water. A woman rises first, tall, broad-shouldered, her hair bound in sinew cord. She holds a spear carved from reindeer bone. At her side, 2 hunters stand ready. Stranger, she calls. What do you bring? Only memory, you answer. They glance at each other. One lowers his weapon slightly. The woman studies you a long moment before gesturing you closer. Her name is Kera. Her people came from inland lakes that dried when the rains stopped. They have lost half their number to cold and hunger, but they still build fires each night, small, low, fed with dried moss. Their speech is slow, shaped by cold air. When they see the marks burned faintly into your skin, spirals, lines of light beneath the surface, they step back in awe. Kera's eyes narrow not in fear but recognition. My grandmother spoke of those who walked with the stars, she says. They said such ones would return when the land forgot its shape. I am no spirit, you tell her. But I remember what was, and what must come next. She nods once. Then eat, we will listen. That night, you sit among them beside a low fire of peat and bone. The flames are small, but the circle of faces glows with something older than fear. You tell them of Tala Rin, of the city that mapped the heavens, of the day the sea withdrew, of the great remembering that broke the world and made it new. Your words are simple. You speak slowly, letting silence fill the spaces between phrases. When you are done, no one speaks for a long time, only the crackle of fire and the sigh of wind through the thawed stones. Finally, Kera says, if the sky can change, so can we. You nod. It already has. Days pass. You help them mend nets with fibers from river reeds, patch boats with tree resin, and carve new star markers on flat stones. The air grows milder. Streams trickle from the cliffs, feeding the first shoots of green. At night you gather the children and teach them to read the new constellations. The stars are not where they used to be, their positions drifted during the long cold. But the old geometry still breathes beneath it, the same rhythm, the same pulse of turning seasons. You use a stick and soft mud to draw the shapes, the river, fish, the great path, the twin firers. The stars move, but their story remains. You tell them, we must learn it again. The youngest, a boy with a voice like a bird, asks, will the sea return? You look at the horizon, the low, misty rim where the world still trembles with change. Yes, you say softly, but not for us. For those who come after. In the mornings, you travel with the hunters. The air smells of thawing peat and distant rain. The rivers carry flakes of ice like fallen glass. You learn to move quietly across softened ground, to listen for the shift in wind that signals open water nearby. Kera walks beside you. She carries a bundle of dried roots and flint, her movements fluid, efficient. Over time, the rhythm between you becomes unspoken. She scouts the slope ahead, you trace the stars to orient the path. One evening, as the sky bleeds into amber, she says, you walk as if you've always been going somewhere. Perhaps I have, you answer. Perhaps we all have. She smiles faintly. Then maybe now you've found where to stop. You look at her, the frost still in her hair, the steadiness in her gaze, and something in you softens. I don't think we stop, you say. You change shape, the weeks pass, the valley becomes a village. Huts rise from woven branches, anchored with stones. Reed boats line the riverbank, their hulls sealed with resin that smells of pine and smoke. Small fires burn all night now, steady and strong. Children laugh. Hunters sing low songs in a language that is already changing. Sounds folding into new rhythms, new meanings. You spend your days mapping again. Not on parchment or shell, but in memory and ritual. Stones are arranged to mark the sun's path. Polished bones serve as shadow gauges. Each night you update the sky table, counting the shift of light along the horizon. You realize that what you are doing is not rebuilding the old knowledge. You are transforming it. The world before the flood was too certain, its maps too perfect, its wisdom too heavy. This time, you keep the lines soft, the truths flexible. The stars will move again after all, the world will forget again, but someone will remember enough. One evening, as the first new constellations appear, you gather the villagers. You stand upon a flat rock warmed by the day's sun. You raise your hands to the sky and speak. These fires we build, they are not to fight the dark. They are to remind the dark that we are still here. The people bow their heads. Some weep quietly. Kara places her hand on your shoulder, rough with callous, steady with belief. The wind carries the scent of thawed soil and distant rain. Somewhere far off, a glacier cracks, a sound like the breaking of an old spell. You close your eyes and listen. It is the sound of the world adapting. Later, alone by the river, you look into the current. The water reflects your face in pieces, scattered by ripples. Behind you, the campfire's glow paints the mist gold. You dip your hand into the water. It is cold, alive, endless. The river flows north, toward lands still sleeping beneath ice. You whisper a promise to it, not of conquest, not of permanence, but of continuity. Remember us, you say, not as what we were, but as what we became. The river murmurs back, soft and endless. You feel the warmth within your chest answer, steady and sure. The fire of memory now lives not in stone or lens, but in people, in breath, in story, in the small choices that endure when everything else changes. You rise, draw your cloak around your shoulders, and turn back toward the camp. Behind you, the river flows on, carrying fragments of light toward the waiting dawn. The sea was no longer a boundary. It was a memory. Where Tala Rin had once shimmered, a mirrored plain of silt and broken coral stretched for miles under the bruised orange light of dawn. Asha stood barefoot in the damp, clay-rich sediment, her reflection ghosted beneath her feet. The smell of salt and rotten lightning filled her lungs. Behind her, the caravan's reed sails flapped weakly in the windless air. They had journeyed for days inland, away from the new coast that kept creeping higher each week, as though the ocean were reclaiming debts it had long been denied. The storms came without rhythm now, whirlwinds of ice, then sudden furnace heat, then eerie airless silence. And yet, despite the ruin, there was movement, purposeful, ancient movement, among those who had gathered. Around Asha stood the survivors of 3 towns, the mapmakers of Tala Rin, the bone carvers of Lurith, and the sea priests of Anora. Each bore the mark of their vanished city, etched stones, shell pendants, crystal shards, fragments of remembrance. They had come here because of the luminaries, lights that had begun to burn in the high desert, beyond the flooded plains. For weeks, shepherds had seen them pulsing like stars fallen to earth, weaving patterns that echoed constellations no one had charted before. The elders whispered that the sky was turning inside out, that what had once been above was remembering its reflection below. Asha had seen one herself 3 nights ago, a pillar of cold light shimmering in silence, the air around it humming with low vibration. It had not been fire or lightning or any craft she knew. The old myths called them watchers of the threshold, but the cartographers called them coordinates, signals pointing to a convergence the ancients had once known. She and Seru walked ahead of the caravan, their feet crunching on crystallized salt crust that sparkled faintly under the morning haze. The sky bleeds itself through the earth now, Seru muttered. Or perhaps, Asha replied, the earth is bleeding into the sky. He gave her a look, half fear, half awe, and said nothing more. They climbed the ridge that bordered the old inland basin. From its crest, they saw the first of the luminaries clearly, a dome of faint silver glow, breathing in slow pulses like the rhythm of a sleeping animal. The land around it was blackened, not burned but fused. Sand melted into smooth glass that caught the dawn. By the time the others arrived, the air hummed. The resonance was physical, it crawled across skin and teeth. Children cried softly. Even the wind refused to cross the glassy plain. The high priest of Anora, draped in ragged kelp cloth, raised a staff crowned with a shard of obsidian. He began to chant in the tongue of their ancestors, syllables that mimicked waves and thunder. The luminary answered. A ring of light expanded from its base, rippling outward across the fused plain. Where it touched the feet of the people, warmth surged upward through bone and marrow, not burning, but remembering. Asha gasped as she felt something awaken behind her eyes. An image, not of sight, but of pattern. A lattice of stars, spinning like a living net. Lines of connection she had once traced on crystal discs in her youth, but now vast, living and complete. The others cried out, some in fear, others in revelation. The priest staggered and fell to his knees, the obsidian staff vibrating until it shattered into dust. Asha felt Seru clutch her arm. You see it too, he whispered. Yes, she breathed. It's a map. That night they encamped around the silent dome. None slept. The air shimmered faintly with residual luminescence, and the very ground seemed to breathe. Asha spread her star chart, a stretched hide painted with soot and crushed mica, and began to mark what she had seen. The others gathered around, whispering, watching her hands move with a certainty she herself did not understand. She drew 3 lines connecting points of light, then a 4th, 5th, 6th. When she finished, the pattern revealed itself, a spiral turning inward toward a single center. "The sky, root," murmured an elder from Lurath. "The heart of the old maps," said another. It was the same geometry carved into the oldest stones of Tala Rin, and into the broken monoliths found deep beneath the sea before it rose. Asher looked up toward the stars. The same spiral faintly mirrored there among constellations now half shrouded by mist. "If the stars and the earth are one map," she said, "then perhaps the luminaries are markers, waypoints to something that survived the last forgetting." 2 days later, another luminary was found further north, smaller, pulsing with deeper light. They followed it, through wind-carved dunes and the ruins of what had once been mangrove forests. The heat was unnatural, waves of humidity alternating with frost-laced air that killed birds mid-flight. But the second luminary was different. It was not a dome, but a column rising from the earth itself, smooth, crystalline and hollow at its heart. Inside it, faint shapes floated like symbols made of smoke. Asher approached alone, her feet sinking into the salt crust. Her reflection warped as she neared the base. The hum deepened, syncing with her heartbeat. She reached out and placed her hand upon its surface. For an instant, everything inverted. She was standing underwater, or perhaps above it. She couldn't tell. Towers of light stretched beneath her feet, rising into infinity. 1,000 maps flickered through her mind. Coastlines reversed, mountains inverted, stars rearranged into new geometries. Voices murmured like tides. "The world sleeps in layers. Memory is sediment. You are the measure between forgetting and becoming." When she tore her hand back, the air cracked like a shell. She fell to her knees, gasping. Seru rushed to her side, shouting, but his voice came from far away. In her palm, burned faintly into the skin, was a mark, a spiral of 7 points, the same as the sky root symbol. That night, when the others asked what she had seen, she could only answer, "The world below still dreams." The priests took it as a sign that the luminaries were the wells of remembrance spoken of in the first Tong, places where the earth still held the memories of the age before ice. But Asher felt something deeper, more terrible. The luminaries were not only remembering, they were awakening. Every dawn since, new ones appeared on the horizon, each one stronger, each one closer, and in the farthest east, beneath the rising sun, a glow vast as a city pulsed, a final convergence calling to her. The luminaries multiplied. Every dawn brought a new glimmer at the edge of the world, faint at first, then pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the horizon. From the high ridges, Asher could see them marking the land in a spiral that grew tighter each night, their lights breathing in rhythm with the stars above. They were not random, she knew. They were aligning. Her palm still bore the faint spiral burn, 7 points circling an invisible center. It tingled whenever a new luminary awoke, a low hum vibrating through bone. The others called her marked, whispered that the ancestors had chosen her to guide them toward the sky route. Though Asher did not feel chosen, she felt tethered to something vast and wordless, something that might not distinguish between salvation and sacrifice. The caravan moved by night now. The days had become unbearable, sudden flashes of cold, windless heat that dried skin to paper. The air tasted of iron. Fish had begun washing ashore hundreds of miles inland, silver bodies twitching on salt flats that had never known tide. Even Seru, who had always joked through every hardship, now walked in silence, his eyes hollow, his beard streaked with ash. "Do you still see it?" he asked one night as they camped beside the ruins of a basalt pillar half buried in sand. "The pattern," she said. He nodded. "Yes. But it's changing. The points are drawing inward." Toward what? The place where the first forgetting began. They reached the convergence fields on the 7th night after leaving the second luminary. The land was scarred. Black glass plains cracked into hexagonal patterns, each fissure glowing faintly blue from within. Mist rose in slow spirals, thick with the smell of minerals and ozone. The air trembled with constant sound, like the echo of distant thunder that never faded. Asher felt it before she saw it, a pulse beneath her ribs, deep and resonant. Ahead, beyond the mist, a valley opened, ringed by jagged cliffs that caught the starlight like mirrors. And there, in the valley's center, the convergence bird, a whirlpool of light spiraling upward from the ground into the sky, connecting earth and stars in a column so vast it made her knees give way. The air itself bent around it, folding in ripples of gravity and color. The survivors fell to their knees, some weeping, others laughing. The priests began chanting. Even the wind turned inward, drawn into the slow rotation. "We've found it," whispered Seru. "No," Asher said softly, tears blurring her sight. "It's found us." The next day's blurred. The caravan made camp on the valley's rim, building shelters of reed and bone among the glowing fissures. Sleep came rarely. When it did, dreams were shared, identical visions among all who slept near the light. They saw towers rising from the sea, star maps spinning in the air, voices whispering from beneath stone. Asher's dreams were deeper. She saw Tala Rin before it drowned, the crystal domes gleaming under stars, the sea calm as glass. But beneath it all, she sensed another Tala Rin, older, vast, buried beneath layers of time. Its streets were made of light, its walls of memory. The same spiral symbol blazed at its heart. When she awoke, her mark ached and burned with cold fire. She knew what the dreams meant. The convergence was not just light, it was a bridge, a place where the memories of the first world leaked into this one. She gathered the priests and the remaining scholars. Around the fire they sat, the luminaries' glow staining their faces silver. This valley was mapped once, she told them, spreading her hide chart. See, the spiral aligns perfectly with the paths of the old constellations. The priest frowned. You mean the stars have shifted to mirror the land? No, Asher said, the land has shifted to mirror the stars. There was silence. The realization hung heavy between them. The sky is remembering itself, murmured Seru, and we are caught inside the memory. On the third night, the convergence changed. The spiral of light slowed, its rotation tightening until it became a pillar of pure white, silent and unmoving. The humming stopped, the air fell utterly still. Then, without warning, the ground fractured. Cracks raced outward from the base of the pillar, slicing through the valley floor like veins of fire. The people screamed as fissures opened beneath their feet, some falling into the glowing chasms that yawned without bottom. Asher ran, shouting for Seru, but the sound of the earth drowning out her voice. She saw him across the plain, pulling a child free from the collapsing ground, and then he was gone, swallowed by a plume of light. She fell to her knees, unable to breathe. The world tilted, gravity itself twisting. The pillar flared, and then folded, collapsing inward into a void of absolute black. The silence that followed was so complete it felt like deafness. Then came the voice. It was not a sound, but a vibration that pressed into every mind at once. Words without language. You have come to the seam between remembrance and renewal. The pattern must reset. The dreaming cannot continue unbroken. The people fell prostrate, sobbing, clutching their ears though the sound came from within. Asher alone looked up, and through the darkness she saw shapes moving inside the void. Not figures but forms, geometric, radiant, alive with mathematics. She recognized them. The same structures she had traced as a child in her map lessons, the spiral, the lattice, the seven-pointed root. They pulsed in sequence, and her mark on her hand answered, glowing with the same light. She stood, trembling, and raised her palm toward the void. If the cycle must reset, she said aloud, then teach me how to remember. The light responded. It reached out, not as a beam, but as a thread, a single line of brightness that connected her palm to the heart of the void. Time vanished. She felt herself falling through centuries, through ages of ice and fire, through forgotten worlds built and unbuilt. She saw the first cities before stone, the first languages sung into wind, the first sky map carved into living crystal. She saw how each age rose, learned, burned, and was buried beneath the next, each leaving behind echoes that would one day become myth. The cycle must turn, the voice murmured. But memory is seed. You carry it now. When the vision broke, Asher lay on the ground at the edge of the valley. The convergence had vanished, the fissures were sealed. The sky was still. Only her hand still glowed, faint, steady, pulsing with the rhythm of the earth. By dawn the survivors began to stir. Their eyes were hollow, their memories fragmented. Some no longer remembered their own names. Others spoke in half-formed words of languages older than they should have known. Asher stood among them, feeling the weight of silence. Seru was gone. Only a circle of scorched glass marked where he had stood. She looked to the horizon. In the far distance storm clouds rose, vast and dark, their undersides glowing with lightning. The air smelled of salt and coming rain. The flood was near. Asher tightened her grip on the obsidian compass at her belt, its needle spinning without direction. The luminaries had gone dark, but their memory burned within her. She turned north, toward the mountains, toward the last high places that might survive the coming tide. As she began to walk, she whispered to the wind, "If memory is seed, then the world will bloom again." The first rain did not fall from above. It came from beneath the ground. You wake to the smell of brine, salt and silt rising from the fissures that once glowed with light. The earth itself exhales moisture, misting your skin until your hair clings like seaweed. The valley hums faintly underfoot, a deep subterranean groan, as though the planet is unspooling its tension. The others stir in silence. They no longer ask questions. They have become like you, moving by instinct, following faint glimmers of understanding rather than reason. The children do not speak anymore. They hum softly when the wind changes, as if repeating a song only they can hear. The sea is coming home. By midday the horizon is gone. A grey curtain rolls toward you from the east. Not waves yet, but haze, thick with vapor and thunder. You can taste the metallic tang of irons in every breath. The animals have vanished inland, even the carrion birds. What remains is the sound, the low, endless percussion of rising water. You shoulder your satchel, maps, the obsidian compass, and one of the star lenses from the observatory in Tala Rin. It is cracked now, its once clear surface fogged with salt, but it still catches the light when you turn it toward the sun. Keep close, you tell the others. We move until we see the old basalt spire. Beyond that, the ridge. No one replies. They move in quiet obedience, a line of silhouettes against the dimming sky, the remnants of a people who once read the stars. The climb is slow. The ground sucks at your feet, not mud, not yet, but a skin of water over dust. Each step leaves a print that fills before you lift your heel. The air cools sharply. Somewhere, lightning touches down in the plains, and a sheet of white light blinds you for a moment. When vision returns, you glimpse the sea. Not the sea as it once was, calm, glimmering, dotted with boats, but a wall of dark glass moving without foam, a continent of water consuming the horizon. You watch in disbelief as it swallows forests whole. The palm crowns vanish first, then the ridges, then the smoke columns from distant fires. The water keeps rising. Asher, a voice murmurs beside you. Naren, the elder who once taught you how to carve the spiral sigil. The world forgets too easily. But perhaps it remembers more gently than we think. You look at him. His eyes are clouded, like silt stirred in river water. How can forgetting be gentle? Because it gives the next dream room to grow. You nod, though your throat tightens. He is old. He will not climb fast enough. You give him your walking staff, the one carved from driftwood polished by generations of tides, and place your hand briefly on his shoulder. He smiles and keeps walking. By the time you reach the basalt spire, rain begins in earnest. It is not a storm in the usual sense. There is no wind, no lightning yet. The rain falls vertically, dense and ceaseless, as if poured through a sieve in the sky. It hisses on the stone, steaming as it hits the cooling earth. The air grows white and soundless except for the rain's whispering. You find shelter in a fissure beneath an overhang. The others huddle close, their breath fogging the air. Asher's hands ache from cold, the glow on her palm now dim and steady, like the pulse of a sleeping ember. She takes the cracked lens from her satchel and sets it in front of the group, catching the faint light that filters through the rain. "See this," she murmurs. "Even broken, it remembers how to bend the sun." The children lean close. Their reflections shimmer in the lens like ghosts. For a moment, they look almost content, the way people do when memory begins to soften into story. Asher feels something shift inside her. Not grief, not relief, something quieter. Acceptance. That night lightning returns. It dances silently within the clouds, long branching strokes of light that illuminate the entire plain. For an instant you see it all, the sea in the distance, glowing with phosphorescence, the ruins of the valley, now half submerged, the silhouettes of creatures fleeing toward higher ground. And beyond them, faint but unmistakable, another light, a luminary, one of the last. It flickers at the edge of the flood, a trembling spark refusing to die. "There," you whisper. "The last memory of Talarin." No one answers. They are asleep, curled under damp hides. You step out into the rain alone, walking until the basalt cuts your feet and your hair sticks to your neck. The air hums, electric and metallic. When you reach the ridge's edge, the luminary collapses inward, like an eye closing. Its last flare burns silver blue across the flood's surface. For a heartbeat you see an entire city reflected there. Crystal domes, spiral towers, the sea calm and golden. And in that reflection, people still walk, still speak, still live as if the world has not yet turned. Then the image fades. Only the water remains rippling and infinite. You whisper a quiet farewell, your voice lost in the storm. By morning, the sea has reached the ridge. You have only one day, maybe two, before it claims even this high ground. The survivors work without speaking, building a final platform of driftwood and stone, not to resist but to remember. They stack obsidian shards, star lenses, carved shells, and a single child's reed flute. Asher places her compass on top. Its needle has stopped spinning. "We cannot keep the land," she tells them softly, "but perhaps the sea will keep us." They nod. Together, they drag the structure toward the edge until the waves begin to lap at its base. Then, one by one, they kneel and lay their palms upon it. A silent farewell to the world they knew. Asher is last. She closes her eyes and feels the wood's roughness beneath her skin, the chill of rainwater between her fingers. She whispers the old words of Talarin, words no one else remembers now. All that is lost returns as light. Then she pushes the monument into the flood. It drifts away slowly, turning with the current, until it merges with the rain-blurred horizon. By dusk, only a handful of them remain, perhaps 20 souls, huddled under a single hide, watching the world dissolve. The ridge is narrow, a thin island in a sea that has no shore. The air smells of salt and burning ozone. The sound of the water has become constant, a heartbeat of the planet itself. Asher opens her satchel and removes a piece of clay, smooth, damp, pliable. With her thumb, she begins to etch lines into it, the arc of a coast, the direction of the stars, the spiral of the luminaries. When the clay is full, she wraps it in palm leaf and buries it beneath a stone at the ridge's peak. For the next dream, she murmurs. The wind rises again. For the first time in weeks, she feels warmth, not from fire, but from the air itself, as though the world's fever is returning. The ice at the horizon melts into rain. Thunder murmurs like distant speech. You lie down wrapping your cloak tight. The smell of wet stone and salt fills your nose. Around you, the others drift into uneasy sleep. Above, the clouds begin to thin, revealing a single bright star, the one you used to navigate by when you first learned the constellations. It seems closer now, trembling as though watching. You think of Saru, of Naran, of the voices that spoke from the light. You think of the sea carrying the monument away, and you imagine it resting one day beneath coral and sand, waiting to be found again. Your breath slows. Your heartbeat matches the rhythm of the waves. Somewhere deep in the earth, the spiral continues to turn. The sea keeps rising. It will drown the valley, the mountains, and the memory of every name once spoken on this coast. But within the sediment, within the minerals, within the quiet geometry of rock and current, the story endures. Asha does not know if she will live to see the next dawn. She only knows that she has drawn the map that will one day awaken in another age, when the world grows curious again. And as she drifts towards sleep, she smiles. Not because she has survived, but because memory, too, can breathe. The rain softens, the air cools, the star brightens, you close your eyes, and the tide takes the rest. The morning broke like glass, sharp and brittle, cutting through the fog that had settled over the camp. The snow had grown thinner in the last few days, revealing the mud beneath, dark and glistening, like the world itself was beginning to thaw. But with that thaw came the rot, of bodies, of food, of faith. Elara sat near the dying fire, the ember glow reflecting off her hollowed cheeks. Around her, the others stirred in silence, moving like ghosts between tents that had begun to sag with damp. The once defiant camp that had stood against the storm now resembled a graveyard. She could hear the creak of leather as Marcus strapped on his belt. His movements were methodical, almost ceremonial. Each buckle tightened, each loop checked. He didn't speak. He hadn't spoken much since the ambush 2 nights ago. 3 men were dead, including Finn, whose laughter had once carried through the woods like a promise. Elara stood, brushing off the frost that clung to her coat. "Where are you going?" she asked quietly. Marcus paused, his eyes, shadowed and sleepless, flicked toward her. "To end this," he said simply. Elara's breath caught. "You mean?" He nodded toward the ridge, where smoke still rose faintly in the distance. "The raiders' camp. We've been running long enough. If we don't stop them now, we'll never make it through the pass. But there are too many." "Not anymore," he interrupted. "They've split their numbers. The storm did our work for us." She studied him. He looked different now, older, harder. Whatever trace of mercy he'd once had was buried under exhaustion and loss. "You can't go alone," she said finally. "I'm not asking anyone to follow." But she was already packing before he could finish. The sun hung low when they reached the ridge, painting the frozen valley in pale gold. Below, the raiders' camp sprawled like a scar, broken carts, tattered banners, and the faint sound of men arguing over dwindling spoils. Elara crouched beside Marcus, scanning the encampment. "There," she whispered, pointing toward a larger tent near the edge. "Their leader." The Marcus's jaw tightened. Corinne. The name tasted of old blood. It was Corinne's men who had burned their wagons, taken their food, left children shivering in the snow. It was Corinne who had turned survival into slaughter. "What's the plan?" Elara asked. Marcus didn't answer. He simply reached for the knife strapped to his thigh. The same blade he had used when they first escaped the valley. He glanced at her once, his expression unreadable. "Stay behind me." The descent was silent, save for the crunch of frost underfoot. They moved like shadows through the ruins, past the carcass of a horse, past the overturned crates that had once held grain. The closer they got, the heavier the air became, thick with the smell of smoke and decay. A guard stirred near the fire. Marcus struck before he could shout, quick, precise, merciless. The body slumped without sound. Elara's heart pounded. She wanted to close her eyes, but she couldn't. Not anymore, she had seen too much. When they reached the tent, Marcus paused at the flap, listening. A low murmur inside, 2 voices, then laughter. He stepped through. Corin looked up from a table strewn with maps and weapons. His face twisted into a sneer. "Well," he said, "the ghost returns." And Marcus said nothing. "You should have stayed buried." Corin continued, rising slowly. He was taller, broader, his furs thick and dark. The scar across his neck gleamed like a pale rope. "You lost everything because of me. Why crawl back now?" Marcus drew his knife. "Because there's still something left to take." The 2 men circled, the tent's dim light flickering between them. Elara stood at the edge, frozen, watching as the past collided with the present. 2 survivors, both forged by ruin. Corin lunged first. The clash was brutal, messy, no skill, no grace, only rage. The knife flashed, a fist connected, blood sprayed across the canvas. Marcus staggered, then drove forward, pinning Corin to the table. "You think you're different," Corin spat, choking. "You think you're better than me." Marcus's voice was low, trembling. No, I think I remember what it was like before. And then the blade sank deep. Corin's body went still. For a moment, only the crackle of fire could be heard. Marcus stood over the body, chest heaving, the knife still in his hand. Elora stepped forward, placing a trembling hand on his arm. "It's over," she whispered. He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time in weeks something shifted behind his eyes. Not relief, not victory, something like grief. When they left the tent, the wind had changed. It was colder now, sharper, but clean. The camp behind them was silent, no more laughter, no more shouting. As they made their way back to the ridge, Elora looked east. Beyond the mountains, the horizon glowed faintly pink, dawn. "Do you think it'll be different now?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. He watched the rising light, his face unreadable. "It has to be," he said finally. "Or all of this was for nothing." They walked on, leaving behind the wreckage of vengeance, stepping toward whatever fragile future still waited for them beyond the pass. The wind carried the smell of thawing earth. It was strange. After months of ice and blood, the scent of soil felt like something sacred. The snow had retreated into streaks along the ridges, leaving the valley raw and wounded. But there was life again. Tiny shoots of green pushing through mud, rivers swollen with meltwater, birds calling somewhere unseen. Marcus and Elora stood at the edge of the pass, staring down at what lay beyond, a vast plain of mist and color, stretching endlessly under the morning sun. Behind them, the mountains loomed like sentinels, jagged and gray. Every shadow there held a memory of the dead, the starving, the burning camps. Ahead lay something unspoken. Not hope exactly, but the space where hope could grow. Elora adjusted the strap of her pack. "We finally made it," she said softly. Marcus nodded, though his eyes were still distant. "We did." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything they'd lost, and everything they hadn't yet found. They began their descent, following the trail that wound down from the ridge. The ground was slick with meltwater, the air heavy with the hum of insects awakening from the long freeze. Every step forward felt like leaving something behind. Elora glanced back once. Smoke still rose faintly from the mountains, the last remnants of their old world dissolving into the pale sky. "Do you think they'll come after us?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "No, they've got nothing left to chase." She wanted to believe him. By midday, they reached the river, wide, fast, and colder than death. The bridge that once spanned it was gone, washed away by storms long ago. Jagged posts jutted from the current like broken teeth. Elora stared at the water. "We can't cross this." "We don't have a choice," Marcus said. He looked upstream, spotting a cluster of fallen logs tangled against the rocks. There, together, they hauled what they could, lashing the pieces with rope and strips of torn canvas. Their hands bled, their muscles ached, but they didn't stop. The river roared beside them, hungry and endless. When the makeshift raft was ready, they pushed it into the current. Marcus went first, steadying it while Elora climbed aboard. The water was frigid, biting at their boots. As the river took them, she grabbed the side rope, knuckles white. "Hold on," Marcus shouted over the rush. The current spun them, slammed them against a rock. The raft shuddered but held. Water splashed high, soaking them through. Elora coughed, blinking against the spray. For a moment the raft teetered on the edge of an eddy, and then, with a final heave, broke free into calmer flow. They drifted, gasping, shivering, alive. On the far bank, the trees were different, tall and green, their branches heavy with buds. The light here was warmer, softer. Marcus stumbled out first, collapsing onto the grass. Elora followed, falling beside him, both of them laughing, not out of joy, but relief so sharp it bordered on madness. They lay there for a long time, staring at the clouds moving across the pale sky. When at last Elora spoke, her voice was quiet. "Do you ever think about before all this?" Marcus turned his head toward her. "Every day. And after." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "That's harder." She looked toward the tree line, where sunlight filtered through in shards. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe after isn't supposed to be easy." He followed her gaze. Somewhere beyond those trees, beyond the river and the scars of war, lay the unknown, the promise of a world not yet ruined by fire and hunger. Elora reached into her coat and pulled out the small wooden charm she'd kept since the beginning. The one Finn had carved, the one she'd almost lost a dozen times. She turned it in her hand, then set it down by the riverbank. "For them," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "For all of them." The wind caught the charm, nudging it gently toward the water. It floated for a moment before the current took it away, spinning, vanishing downstream toward places neither of them would ever see. That night, they built a fire. The flames danced low and golden, the air rich with the smell of pine. Marcus sat sharpening his knife, an old habit he couldn't quite abandon, while Elora cooked what little they'd gathered. "You think anyone else made it?" she asked. Marcus looked into the fire. "If they did, they'll find us eventually." She smiled faintly. Then we'll start again. He didn't answer, but his expression softened. The world beyond the flames' reach was dark, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like a threat. The night deepened. Somewhere an owl called. The river murmured softly behind them, and above the stars, untouched by all that had passed, burned in silent witness. Elara leaned back, watching them. "We're crossed," she said quietly. Marcus followed her gaze, his face lit by firelight. "Yes," he said. "We did." And in that simple truth, not triumph, not redemption, but survival, the world began again.